Go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The Prime Minister promises to unleash the country's fiscal firepower as petrol prices see their biggest daily jump in 17 years.
Good morning to you. It's 6 o'clock on Thursday, the 9th of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel and Stephen, and this is what we've got for you today.
The Prime Minister will pledge today to cut costs in every area of household expenditure, from food to energy to transport. In a major speech on tackling the cost of living crisis, Boris Johnson is expected to say that Britain will become a strong country with a healthy economy.
The cost of filling up an average family car with petrol could hit £100 for the first time today after the biggest daily jump in pump prices for 17 years. The RAC's fuel spokesperson has warned that a peak is still some way off.
Berlin's Interior Affairs Minister suggested that a mentally ill person running amok was to blame after a car was driven into a crowd in the city, killing one teacher and injuring 14 children. A 29-year-old man, believed to be the driver, was detained at the scene.
Don't forget, we would love to hear from you today. Whatever you want to talk about, then we're here to listen to your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can send us a tweet at GB News.
And a little reminder, you can subscribe to the GB News channel on YouTube to get all the latest on the big stories everyone's talking about.
So to our main news today, and the Prime Minister is about to pledge to help people cut costs in every area of household expenditure.
In a major speech in Lancashire today, he'll set out his vision for tackling the cost of living crisis, vowing to use fiscal firepower to help those who need it most, adding, "We will emerge from this a strong country with a stable economy."
Well, new forecasts from the OECD predict the UK to see the slowest growth of any country in the G20 except Russia, with what looks like 0% growth next year, prompting fears of a 1970s-style stagflation, as they call it.
And this comes as petrol prices experience their biggest daily jump in 17 years, with the cost of filling up an average family car expected to hit £100 today.
Well, let's talk to the editor of the newspaper Capex, John Ashmore, who's here. Morning to you. Look, what can we really expect from the Prime Minister today that's going to make any difference at all?
Well, the big announcement is on housing. So he's going to announce that they're going to extend the right to buy to housing association tenants. So at the moment, we have just over 4 million people live in social housing. About 1.5 million of those are council housing, the rest are housing association. So this is a policy that's been trialled before. It was in the 2015 Tory manifesto, so it's not completely new, and that's why Labour are calling it a rehash. But in terms of, immediately alleviating people's problems, it's not going to, it's not going to pay anyone's bills next week, put it that way.
Exactly, and that's what people are asking for, isn't it? Some immediate help.
Yeah, well, you saw in the last spring statement there was a cut to fuel duty, for example, and that's already been wiped out by the rise in petrol prices. We're getting up to £100 to fill up a 55-litre family car now. So, that's hitting a lot of people. A lot of the media like to concentrate on trains and public transport and stuff, but the car is still the main way people get around, so it's absolutely punishing. The thing that's really concerning is that the RAC is saying it's actually going to get worse from here. So we're still not at the peak of where petrol prices could go.
I mean, using the phrase that we need to unleash our fiscal firepower and get help to those who need it most. I mean, really what we can expect from the Prime Minister, there will be sort of a broad sweeping picture today, because if it was going to be those sort of detailed announcements, surely they would be coming from the Chancellor. And I suppose what the Prime Minister is trying to do today in many ways is to redress a bit of the problems within his parliamentary party.
Yeah, it's about kind of setting the mood more than anything. You can see in the bits that they've put out already, it says in the coming weeks there will be announcements on childcare, energy, transport and other things. So we're not expecting a big detailed pitch today. The main detail will be that stuff on housing, which, as you say, is more of a long-term thing. It's not going to help in the immediate term. But
what we've heard is the possibility next year of stagflation, 0% growth, which is very bad news. So clearly, what we're needing now is some sort of clear, coherent plan for growth over the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, this is the big problem, and it's what you hear from business people all the time, is they just don't know which way the government's going on one thing or the other. For example, we have a big thing called a super deduction for companies that invest in their plant and machinery. You get lots of money off. Then in 2023, corporation tax goes up from 19 to 25%. If you're coming to invest in Britain, what does that tell you? There's no consistency of approach here, and it does feel as though it's a policy launch designed more to do with the Prime Minister's political position than a kind of coherent policy offer.
What about the forecast from the OECD yesterday? I mean, forecasting, typically difficult, and, you can't always put too much weight on it. But the OECD, widely respected, has come out and saying that we're going to be the worst G20 country in terms of growth, behind Russia, which, of course, is being heavily sanctioned at the moment. I mean, what on earth would be the explanation for that?
Yeah, I mean, you're right about forecasting. They say it's economic forecasting is there to make astrologers look good. But it's quite striking to see an international organisation kind of giving tips to your own government. And one of them was cut taxes, which would be news to the, music to the ears of a lot of the Tory backbenchers. I think a lot of the disgruntlement you see at Boris Johnson, it's not just about Partygate or cakes or anything like that. It's about the general fiscal direction of the government. Lots of tax rises, lots of public spending, not much. You see Tory MPs coming out this week saying, you're a Conservative, governor's one. And I think that's what a lot of those MPs want to see from him.
What about the Bank of England in all of this? I mean, they've got a huge amount of power, and it's pretty clear they don't really know what to do certainly about the inflation problem. I mean, we've seen interest rates go up, but all the experts seem to be saying, well, actually, this isn't going to make a huge difference.
I think the elephant in the room there is that the Bank of England itself is responsible for a large amount of inflation because of the amount of quantitative easing we've had all the way back since 2010. You can't just pump £1 trillion or so of money into an economy and not expect prices to do something. Having said that, some of these pressures are out of their hands. There's no escaping the fact that the war in Ukraine, the problems with Chinese ports and things, lots of problems with refineries, all these things that feed into the cost of petrol and diesel products. There's not much the bank can do about that. They can, play around with interest rates a bit, but I think the main thing here is for the government to get on with, like you said, a more coherent plan for growth that gives people a bit of confidence in the future.
Just finally, I want to ask you about one of the other things that was sort of brought up. I think the best way to describe it is one of the letters that was circulating on Monday following the announcement that was going to be this vote of no confidence, and it mentioned the policy on Rwanda. Well, we're hearing today that human rights lawyers are set to ground that first flight, which was due to take off next week. How much of a blow will that be for the Prime Minister and indeed his Home Secretary?
I don't think it's a blow at all. I think it's exactly the fight that he wanted to have, actually, about this, and almost certainly expected to have, because it puts him on the side of what is a popular policy, whether some people in the media don't like it that much, but out there in the public, and certainly among Conservative MPs, it's a popular policy. And he can say, we're trying to fight the good fight against the lovey-dovey human rights lawyers. And I don't think he'll mind these headlines one bit.
OK. John Ashmore, good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's talk to our Scotland reporter, Davy Donaldson, who's in Stirling, where the price of petrol has gone above £2 a litre. Morning to you, Davy. Look, what's it standing at exactly?
Well, a lot of people's eyes will be taking a second look as they drove into Stirling services this morning. We've got unleaded at 202.9 and diesel at 204.9. So this has gone through the £2 barrier for the first time, certainly that I'm aware of, in Scotland. There are a couple other stations nearby, Hamilton services, approaching that mark, certainly over that for diesel, but for petrol it may just top that mark today. But yeah, this is unbelievable. I mean, we really didn't think we'd see this for quite some time. We knew that petrol prices and diesel prices would go up, but I think a lot of people are looking and shaking their head in disbelief at how much they've gone up and how quickly they've gone up. We saw earlier this week, on Tuesday, that biggest rise in 17 years. It's going to cost, as you said earlier, up to £100 now for a tank of fuel. So, you know, the big question is, where's it going to end? Because people simply don't have the money. We've got a cost of living crisis with people's energy bills going up tenfold. So, you know, it's really, really difficult. The other thing I would say here as well is that we're obviously got some strike action planned later this month by Network Rail. The drivers are in dispute with ScotRail, the train company here as well. So really, you know, the option of taking public transport isn't that easy, because there's going to be strike action taken and services. We've already seen services in ScotRail here last Sunday. The services pulled at the last minute, so most people will want to take the car. The unfortunate problem is the cost of fuel.
OK, Davey, thank you very much indeed for that. Now, one of the big issues that we've been talking about this morning, if you've been watching on social media, we were previewing this, talking about curries.
I wouldn't call it a big issue.
No.
To be fair. But it's an interesting one.
The lighter
nonetheless.
Issue. Yeah, curries. How hot do you like them? This is the big question we're asking this morning. I like a hot curry. It's a hot topic, if you will. I think I've kind of changed my taste, though, as times have gone by.
Have you?
Used to
Have you
prefer...
become more adventurous?
I've just got into hotter curries as I've got older. I actually think it's COVID-related, in all honesty, because I lost my taste for a period of time. And I got really into eating spicy food because I didn't notice it.
Right.
And then I just got the taste for it.
Maybe. Well, anyway, there's a survey out saying who likes it hot and who likes it
Can you guess which parts of the country like a hot curry and which don't? Top 5.
Newcastle.
Comes out on top.
I don't know if I'm surprised by that or not.
I wonder if there's a correlation to being in a sort of cooler, colder part of the country and liking a hot curry. No,
but what I am surprised at is Birmingham is number 4 in the like it not hot list. Now, Birmingham is the home of the Balti.
Yeah.
You can get some nice spicy jalfrezi Baltis and things. And obviously there is a big Indian and Pakistani community within Birmingham as well. Don't like it hot.
Well, London, we've got, what's the road I want to think of? Yellow Brick Road. Yellow Brick Road is what I wanted to say, but that's not. Brick Lane. There you go, not Yellow Brick Road. Brick Lane in London, where you can get the best curries in town. And we're number 2 in the capital for liking hot curries. So it's Newcastle, London, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Brighton like it hot. Bristol, Norwich, Liverpool, Birmingham and Manchester don't like a hot curry. Let us know your thoughts. Where do you stand on that spectrum?
Yes, GB Views at gbnews.uk. I was going to say hotter the better. No, you can overdo it.
You can overdo it, yeah.
You can overdo it.
Make yourself ill.
But you definitely want something nice and spicy.
But does it just apply to curries, or would you like a hot chili con carne, for example, or guacamole?
Anything. I put chilies in almost anything. I put chilies in a cheese sandwich.
It's funny, though, having kids, watching their reaction. I mean, the best way to stop kids nicking your food, it's got spice in it. I don't want any, put any spicy food in, and they just crying.
Really?
Yeah, you don't naturally, as a human, I think, like spicy food. It's a taste you acquire. That's my theory, anyway.
Oh, well, let us know what you think. It is 12 minutes past 6. Let's bring you up to date with some of the other headlines this morning. The Prime Minister is set to announce a string of housing reforms, including plans for lower-paid workers to be able to use housing benefits to buy their homes. He's going to be talking in Lancashire later, and he'll commit to an extension of the Right to Buy scheme for housing association tenants. He's going to argue that £30 billion in housing benefit that currently goes towards rent could help people secure and pay for mortgages.
Campaigners have formally launched legal bids to stop the government's plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. The first flight is expected to leave next Tuesday, but lawyers for more than 90 migrants have already submitted legal challenges asking to stay in the UK.
The libel claim made by the Duke of Sussex against the Mail on Sunday publisher due to have its first hearing at the High Court today. Harry's suing Associated Newspapers Limited after they published a story surrounding his legal case against the Home Office in regard to his security arrangements when visiting the UK. Now, Berlin's Interior Affairs Minister has said that evidence suggests it was a mentally ill person running amok who was to blame after a car was driven into a crowd in Germany's capital city yesterday.
The crash killed a teacher and 14 children, and a 29-year-old man who's believed to be the driver was detained at the scene.
Well, let's get the latest on this with freelance reporter Thomas Sparrow, who joins us from Berlin. Morning, Thomas. What more can you tell us today?
The investigations are still continuing here in Berlin after that event that you mentioned yesterday. The fact that a 29-year-old man of German Armenian descent living here in Berlin drove first into that group of pedestrians and then crashed his Renault car into a shop window. Police have mentioned that they are still looking into every possible option to understand what the motivation might have been. But as you mentioned in your introduction, Berlin's interior senator stated that it is very probable that the motivation behind this was actually psychological problems that the 29-year-old man had. There have been reports that in the car there were a couple of posters or placards with possibly political statements, but police also stated that unlike media reports, they were not able to find a specific letter by this 29-year-old man. As such, police is still continuing to investigate what the possible motivation might have been, whether it was definitely a psychological issue or whether there could also have been a political motivation as well.
Thomas, are you able to give us any update on those that were affected in this crash? I mean, we talked about the 14 injured school children. We know that their teacher was killed, and there were a number of other injuries, many of them with potentially life-threatening or life-changing injuries.
Most of those affected were part of this school trip to Berlin. It was a school group coming from the German state of Hesse. And in fact, one of the teachers, a female teacher, was killed. She's the one person who died as part of all this. And there are at least a dozen other people who are injured. Police have given different numbers throughout yesterday and this morning as well. Some of the latest figures that we've heard is that probably 5 people have life-threatening conditions, life-threatening injuries, but that is something that authorities have also stated that could change as the day progresses. But as I mentioned, most of the affected are actually students who were part of this school trip from Hesse. And as such, we have heard from many politicians here in Germany, local politicians in Berlin, but also the Chancellor Olaf Scholz, the federal president Frank-Walter Steinmeier, basically say that they are shocked at what happened in particular, also showing their solidarity towards that particular town in Hesse and obviously the school group that was involved in this attack.
Okay, Thomas, look, we appreciate you bringing us up to date this morning. Thank you.
Just so awful. You know, as a parent, you send your children off on a school trip. It's every parent's worst nightmare. It's awful for everyone involved, but and some of the footage and the pictures yesterday was just absolutely horrifying, terribly tragic. Our thoughts go out to all those involved. Look, stay with us. Lots more coming up this morning.
Yeah. Could England be smoke-free in just 8 years? It's a heck of a task. We'll be meeting the former smoker who welcomes the move. Before all that, though, let's have a look at the forecast for today.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Fine at first today, sunny spells in the south and then later in the day the east as well. But rain is expected to move in from the west. That rain because of a series of weather fronts that are approaching from the west as we speak. Low pressure carrying those fronts. Used to be a tropical storm, ex-tropical storm Alex. No longer a tropical storm, just an area of low pressure in the Atlantic. But it will bring some windy weather during tomorrow and Saturday especially. Before that happens, actually, we keep the sunny skies across much of central and eastern England, parts of southwest Scotland, Cumbria as well through much of the day. Some showers will develop after a cloudy start in the east of Scotland as well as the far northeast of England. The more persistent rain arrives into western areas, and 16, 17 Celsius for Plymouth and Cardiff will feel quite cool compared to recent days. 21 Celsius, meanwhile, in the east of England, and certainly an improvement here compared to recent days. But the cloud and the rain in the west tends to push eastwards, fading away, so not much to it by the end of the night. And then, increasingly, the cloud breaks up. Still the potential for some showers in the far southeast and the far northwest, but in between clear spells and a keen breeze, that wind starting to get stronger all the while. And, of course, with that wind in place, it's not going to be a cool start to Friday. For many places, we'll look at the morning lows at 13 to 15 Celsius. So a blustery day to come tomorrow. Plenty of bright weather. For much of England and Wales, it stays dry. There'll be sunny spells, but it will be noticeably breezy. And that wind particularly strong towards the northwest. And for Western Scotland, the risk of gales around exposed coasts. The showers will be lively as well for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Risk of hail and thunder. Similar conditions on Saturday with frequent showers towards the northwest, along with a strong wind and gales for exposed coasts. Brighter skies for the rest of the UK, but breezy and feeling cool.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 21 minutes past 6. Still to come on your Thursday programme. As the cost of fuel increases, the price of plane tickets have gone up in price as well. At around 6:45, we'll be speaking to a travel expert who shares her top tips on how to keep prices low whilst you're flying high.
Also in the next hour, it's National Carers Week. We'll be talking to one young carer who looks after his brother, his sister and his dad.
What a hero. Let us know your thoughts this morning. Get involved in the conversation. Email us gbviews@gbnews.uk or you can tweet us @gbnews.
Now, it's believed the government is going to raise the legal smoking age to 21, as well as putting new taxes on tobacco companies, all in a bid for England to be smoke-free by 2030.
Well, former smoker Felicity Morse supports the move and joins us in the studio this morning. Very good morning to you, Felicity. It's quite a task, isn't it, to make the UK smoke-free in the next 8 years?
I think it is quite a task, and it depends if it's smoke-free or vape-free. But I think it's a great initiative.
What do you make of increasing the age to 21? Mm-hmm. Right, see the sense in that. It used to be 16, then 18, now 21. Is that actually going to make a significant difference? Because part of a lot of people start smoking way before the legal age anyway, because it's it's a bad thing to do.
Right, so I started smoking at 14, right? And the smoking age was 16 when I started. I think it fundamentally misunderstands the nature of addictions at all, in that if you're addicted to something or if you want it enough, you'll find a way to get it. But it may stop people becoming addicted to smoking. So, yeah.
So you talk about becoming a smoker at age 14 and you don't smoke anymore. What sort of brought about your conversion, as it were? And do you regret those years that you were a smoker?
So I loved smoking. So to start off with, the problem with quitting smoking was the fact that I really, really liked it. And then I was like, do you know what? I don't want to do this anymore.
Why?
Why did I love it?
No, why did you not want to do it anymore if you loved it so much?
Do you know what? There's a level at which it's quite unmanageable. Like, you have to go out and buy cigarettes all the time. It's quite smelly. You have to go outside. There starts to become a feeling of like, oh, I'm not feeling good, I need to have a cigarette. There's that kind of dependency thing that starts to come in, and it starts to... You might enjoy the first cigarette of the day, but like after that, it just feels like you're on a chain.
Why did you love it then?
Why did I love it?
What's the good feeling about having a fag?
I don't want to advertise smoking, but like for me, it was just like there was an entire ritual involved with it. You know, it's like it's a little segment in your day. It's time out. There's a beginning and an end. It's why I don't vape, because vaping you can just go on forever.
To be smoke-free, though, by 2030, I mean, do you think that's taking away certain freedoms? I mean, lots of people can smoke responsibly. I've got lots of friends who are social smokers. Yeah, I've got loads of friends who don't smoke Monday to Friday, gets to the weekend, they have a couple of glasses of wine, they're with friends, and they happily enjoy a couple of cigarettes. And to have that removed, it's a freedom, it's a choice. And, you know, do we really need to live in a sort of nanny state where people can't be trusted to smoke responsibly?
Well, like I said, I think like these sort of rules or laws to put in, they will stop people from smoking potentially, or make the obstacles very difficult for people who, you know, are social smokers or don't really care about it that much. I think if people want to do something enough, they'll do it. And I do think that I do agree in personal choice and responsibility and all of that stuff.
Because otherwise you just apply it across the board to all sorts of other things that aren't good for you. You know, when we start banning unhealthy food, we start banning gambling, you know, at what point do you say we want to just make everyone's decisions for them? Because...
Right, and there's such a thing as like getting, you know, cross-addicted. You put down one thing, you pick up something else, like, you know.
But the thing is, I always just sort of think it's, if you talk to a former smoker, the one thing they say to a young person is, do not do this, because once you've started, it is so hard to give up, and you never quite totally lose the urge, do you? The thing I know about
knowing lots of ex-smokers is that you only give up the cigarette that you're giving up. That's it. You can always pick back up.
Yeah.
Once you pick back up, you're right back on it.
Yeah.
That's what I know about smoking.
I wonder if the deterrents have started to disappear away. I mean, for me, I never took up smoking because I grew up with a grandfather who was a chain smoker, and I know that he had a horrendous stroke, which was clearly linked to that habit. And he was always underweight, and he was always chained. It was always a bit smelly of cigarettes, and it was just the biggest turn-off as a kid. But we're not seeing those sorts of things. Young people don't necessarily see that, which is good, obviously. People aren't getting lung cancer in the same numbers. You aren't getting strokes linked to smoking in the same numbers. And yet, perhaps just having the pictures on a packet sort of aren't... People are a bit desensitised to those.
Yeah, I think you can get very desensitised. I mean, I think one of the things smoking does is also I definitely used it to desensitise myself a little bit as well, right? It's like you feel a bit anxious, you have a cigarette, you calm down. Now, whether that starts because you're addicted or whether it's already going, which is why you pick up the cigarette, that's open to like a lot of discussion. But yeah, I do wonder, like, it will put in a social barrier for sure. It will make it harder if you make it more expensive and you raise the age. But I think less and less people are smoking.
Yeah.
Felicity going down somewhat. Look, Felicity, good to talk to you.
Thank you.
Keep up the good fight. I know. Yeah, I mean, you raised a valid point about the sort of the freedom side of it. But I do think anyone who's given up would say never start it. Half the people who smoke say, I wish I could give it this up.
I know, but do you want someone telling you to do that, or do you have to come to your own conclusions? Let us know your thoughts this morning. Get involved. I'm sure there'll be lots of views coming in on that. Look, stay with us. We're going to take a quick break. After that, Dawn Neeson and Mike Parry are in the studio. They're going to be reviewing your Thursday papers in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
.30 morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Isabel. Let's bring you up to date with some of the stories today. The Prime Minister is set to announce a string of housing reforms, including plans for lower paid workers to use housing benefits to buy their homes. Boris Johnson will make a speech in Lancashire later and will commit to extending the right to buy scheme for housing association tenants. He's going to argue that the £30 billion in housing benefit that currently goes towards rent could help people secure and pay for mortgages.
Campaigners have formally launched legal bids to stop the government's plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. The first flight was expected to leave next Tuesday. Lawyers for more than 90 migrants have already submitted legal challenges asking to stay in the UK.
Number of jobs offering a 4-day week has gone up by 90%. The job site CV Library says the charity sector, sales, catering and distribution have seen the biggest rise in 4-day-a-week adverts.
Well, it's time to go through your Thursday morning newspapers with the former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, and the journalist and broadcaster, Mike Parry. Very warm welcome to you both. Thanks for coming in bright and early. Dawn, let's start with the front of the Mirror this morning at the petrol crisis. It's just unbelievable. And to think that we're not even at the peak, as the RAC are warning.
Yeah, it's an interesting morning for all the newspapers. None of them really agreeing on what the splash is. A couple of similar things on the front. And the Mirror is just, I mean, if you want to cheer yourself up, don't buy the Mirror this morning. Okay. Great paper, but don't buy it. It's not exactly cheerful. £100 to fill your family car. And we're not talking, you know, the super-duper cars here. We're talking an ordinary family car. So 2p rise is the biggest jump in 17 years for the cost of our petrol. So a 55-litre tank, and I think I don't drive, unfortunately, not for a long time. But that's an average car.
Yeah, well, it's actually a pretty small tank.
It is,
Yeah. So there
about
you go.
70 litres normally, isn't it, for a decent-sized car?
See, there you go. So, and that is now £99.40 today at most pumps. But the RAC say it will go up again today and possibly over that £100 mark.
Why are we seeing? Does it tell us why we're seeing a big jump in the last 24 hours?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, it's the main reason for the jump in oil. Is it the jump in oil prices? But why is it this 24 hours? And I've gone through it all, and I'm still trying.
It's about deliveries. It's about deliveries and the rate at which they come to this country. And the other thing is, China have only got to up their demand by 1% for the whole price of petrol around the world to go up because, for instance, a tanker which is heading to Europe or heading here, suddenly the Chinese offer a bit more money for it. It turns round and it goes to China.
But the thing is, Mike, the fuel they're selling now on the garage forecourts, they've had in their storage tanks for days.
I know, but
so why are they suddenly putting that price?
Because the industry exists on futures, and they price it all in because it's going to cost more, and they don't want to get caught out losing money.
The other thing, Mike, is that the Chancellor, this 5p fuel duty, and you're meant to see the prices immediately at the pump. The price is going, and they never did. Our local garage, on the very day this was announced, put their price up by 5p.
It is an utter disgrace, that. I mean, if the Chancellor really wants to help, he could cut VAT on petrol and diesel, says one expert. That is absolutely true, because every time the price of a litre of petrol goes up, the take that the government goes up as well, percentage-wise, of the VAT. It's a scandal.
Nearly 35% of what you pay is on fuel duty.
Absolutely.
16% on VAT.
Absolutely.
You take those two off.
And the government have the immediate ability to slash that and make it easier for the motorist, OK?
Yeah. Well, they do. That would mean a very big hit in the coffers. Would we make it up in terms of increased usage and getting about more and
they're giving money away everywhere else, aren't they? I mean, Rishi Sunak must have a plan. I'm reading every day that, government revenues are up, Rishi's got a bit more money to play with. Well, help the motorist here. There's one line here which I object to. For many people, driving a car is not a luxury but a necessity. That's absolutely true. But it should also not be prohibitive to be a luxury. People who've got two homes, for instance, want to go from one to the other. Is that a luxury or a necessity? You shouldn't feel that you're a bad person because you're driving for social and domestic purposes, not business.
Well, also, it doesn't just affect Joe Public, does it? It's the HGV drivers, it's the farmers, and that also then has a knock-on in terms of the cost of
taxi
goods
drivers
and food. Exactly.
You have to earn their living.
It's all bad for the cost of living crisis.
If you're a farmer, what's the price of red diesel at the minute? Let us know. I don't, because obviously that's a lot. It's a lot cheaper. Red diesel is an awful lot cheaper because half the duty isn't on it. But even so, it'd still be going on, which is going to affect you. Looking at, I was going to say, because of the whole cost of living thing, Archie's been in touch this morning. Says, given that people are suffering just now, why are they not talking about green taxes on our bills? That would take 25% off in one go.
Every time I talk about fuel bills, and we've just had another one in, and it's like, 25% because we're a dual fuel, a single fuel electric. 25% is on VAT, the green levy. Why not take that off just as a short-term measure? Not forever, just for now.
I'd make it a long-term measure. I think it's a racket and a scandal. It started with Gordon Brown, really. Every time he needs to raise a bit more money, I'll tell you what, we'll protect the environment. We'll stop people flying, introduce a green tax. It was just a racket to give the government more money.
It's not really working.
No.
It's still all going to burn in hell next week or something.
And I'd love to know where they divert that money to in terms of helping the environment. You don't see them planting trees all the time, do you, with the money they've got?
Well, in terms of that cost of living, Mike, in the Express, the PM is going to make some supposedly pretty bold promises today.
Well, this amuses me a bit because the government of Number 10 have leaked this speech that Mr Johnson's going to make today, and he's going to say, we have the tools, we need to get on top of rising prices. The global headwinds are strong, but our engines are stronger. And while it's not going to be quick or easy, you can be confident that things will get better. Hang on, Boris, you say we have the tools we need to get on top of rising prices. Use them. because we're all suffering. We're all suffering terrible hardship with prices going up all over the place. So stop blathering and start doing something.
Well, our engines aren't stronger. We can't afford the fuel to keep going.
Exactly, that's
there was another joke in there, but I'm not going down that road.
One of the tools that he is going to outline today is possibly to help people with the housing crisis, Dawn, and you've got this on the front of the Times, that this right to buy Thatcherite policy, making a bit of a comeback, it's been heavily trailed. What's the Times take on it?
Right, OK, well, this is lower paid workers will be able to use their housing benefits to buy homes under plans to be announced today in the speech that's been very, very heavily leaked, it has to be said. And as you say, Isabel, this is actually channeling his inner Margaret Thatcher. He's actually turning the clock back to helping homeowners, youngsters buy their homes. I mean, we have this, only 34% of 20 to 34-year-olds can actually own their own home these days. And what they are suggesting today is that going back to being Thatcher, cutting taxes, helping businesses grow and giving people money to spend and helping people own their own homes. And the other thing to do with this story is that they are going to... Michael Gove, the Levelling Up Secretary, has said that he's secured an agreement that every social housing home that is made easier for people to buy, proper Thatcher, is going to be replaced by another one now. So we don't run down that housing stock, because the thing is, do we have enough homes to do this with?
That's all well and good, but what I don't understand from this, what makes me a little bit uncomfortable, is considering that, you know, we're paying so much money in taxes and things because of to keep benefits going.
Yes.
Is this is all about allowing people to use benefits, so our money. To pay their mortgage.
Yeah, but isn't that a good investment? If you're being given benefit money and you put it into bricks and mortar, you are actually investing it very wisely. I mean, like you...
but we don't... Like the people whose money it ultimately is, aren't getting any return from that, are they?
Well, the return will come in future generations, you see what I mean? Because housing values over the long term always go up, they don't go down. So it's better than using that welfare money down the pub or the betting shop or buying cigarettes. If you put it into property, you know that you've actually invested it. And Dawn's made a great point here. Michael Gove says that for every house we sell, we'll replace with another one, social housing. That, of course, was the damage done by the Thatcher scheme. We ended up with no council houses, as they were called in those days.
How are they going to replace it with new... we've not got enough stock as it is.
Do you know
where are they going to magic up this social housing?
They have to give more tax advantages and benefits to commercial builders. You know, we've got a very efficient private housing construction industry in this country. And a tweak here and a tweak there with allowances on land and all that kind of stuff, you can get houses built more quickly. But it's all down to the private sector.
This is exactly what this is about, isn't it? And this is the whole speech today that Boris is going to make is about basically the Tories going back to being the Tories. Which is,
well, we hope so.
Have any chance of saving their skins, that's exactly what they need to do. Cutting taxes, helping the business grow, driving the economy, and that is what this is part of.
OK. Mike.
Yes.
Another controversial issue in the Mail this morning, the Rwanda flights. The first one's going to be grounded by the lawyers.
Well, this was always going to happen, wasn't it? We knew this. Even when Priti Patel announced her policy, she said, I anticipate that a group of lefty lawyers, she was quite dismissive about them, she didn't show them much respect, a group of lefty lawyers will get together and try to stop this issue. Now, I love the way the Mail have done this story this morning. Lawyers set to ground first Rwanda flight. They say on their front page piece here, they say there is still a chance, albeit a low chance, that it will happen, i.e. the flight will go. It's still on until a judge decides otherwise. The problem is, we know in this country now, don't we, that right across the judicial system, there is a left-wing persuasion. We've seen it when the decisions on Brexit were taken to court and all of a sudden the judges sided with the Remainers. We've seen it happen. And people will say, where's your evidence? I get the feeling there is a left-wing influence that has seeped into the legal profession. So I love the way the Mail have done this story, because what they've got is they've got a chap called Dr. Rakib Ihsan, who is a community relations expert, who points out all the advantages of the Rwandan situation. The ability of an independent country to control its borders is one of the basic benchmarks of a functioning government. And he goes on to say it's innovative and pragmatic. The reaction of the left is depressing and predictable.
Isn't it right, though, in a civilised society that people can legally challenge a position?
Of course it is. But the problem is that if it's done for reasons other than the specific issue. It's a challenge against the government's authority. We know that because if you look at the groups that have got together to fund the campaign against the people being sent to Rwanda, you'll see that very few of them are actually directly involved in immigration policies. You see what I mean? And they all come together. But the question I always ask here, whenever this comes up and people say, we're going to court, we're going to stop it, what is your alternative? We have never had anybody since the Rwanda policy was introduced who's come up with a credible alternative.
Well, maybe there isn't
10,000
one.
people this year already is as many as came in the whole of last year.
But maybe there isn't one, and, you know, don't forget how expensive this is going to be for the taxpayer. Hugely costly. And 7 out of 10 of those people who will be sent to Rwanda will then be allowed legally to return.
Yeah.
So what a huge waste of money.
Well, we're just hoping it's a deterrent, aren't we? We're hoping that people who give £5,000 to a people smuggler in Calais will now think twice and say, crikey, I could be on a plane flying over the top to Rwanda by the time I get there.
These are young men that we are...
All young men. All young men. A report from Hull this morning. One hotel in Hull has been taken over by the local authority to house immigrants. Every single occupant of that hotel in Hull is a young male. Absolutely.
I want to know what's happening to the women and the children of the young men that are coming over across the channel. Where are they? They're not making it over.
No.
So all these lawyers who are busy fighting these claims for these young men, why are they not fighting for the women and the children, and especially the young girls that are left behind?
Yes. No, I totally agree with that. I totally agree. What support are they getting and where are they?
Right.
Yeah.
Dawn.
Stephen.
Let's have a look at rail strikes. Shall we just cheer us up this morning?
Shall we cheer ourselves up with some rail strikes?
Well,
this is the front page of the Eye, which really, I mean, it is like free razor blade for every reader this morning. I mean, it's like, well, I'm not even going to read the subject out. Subject is a little bit something. It's just listing where we are at the moment. I mean, the rail strike passengers face 6 days shut down, something we sort of knew. But it is going ahead, and as we've discussed this morning, with petrol prices increasing, we can't afford to drive. Flying is in chaos. We can't fly anywhere. Now we can't get a train anywhere.
What are they complaining about this time? Because obviously, the industry itself is just getting back on its feet.
Well, this is what they want is they want guaranteed wage increases linked with inflation, no job losses, and that's basically. But bearing in mind, I mean, the pandemic has really changed travel habits. 25% fewer ticket sales, but we also taxpayers kept the railways running at £16 billion cost to us, which was £600 per household during the pandemic.
Wow.
And the industry now has been asked to pay back £2 billion of that. And money has to be saved from somewhere, and the unions and the government need to actually sit down and sort this out, because once again it's the ordinary people, the taxpayers that have already paid, that are suffering.
I'm sorry, I'd appeal to the rail workers themselves and look back and see what happened to the coal mining industry, OK? The coal mining industry tried to take on the Thatcher government on a purely political basis to get rid of them. And by the time Mrs Thatcher stepped down, there wasn't a coal mining industry. It literally disappeared.
And the average...
because it became cost ineffective, and they said we can get it elsewhere. Now, I'm not saying that we can travel on things other than trains, right? But we don't need as many trains now, as you pointed out, that we did a long time ago.
We don't always need people to drive them or to manage the gates.
Yes,
quite right.
A point that was made to us yesterday on this programme was that as there is such low unemployment at the moment, actually the rights of workers, the balance is in their favour at the moment. We can probably see the return of unions, of strikes right across the board. Just something else to really look forward to.
I mean, the thing is, the average rail salary in the UK, and I know we are talking about not just the drivers who are on over £50,000, but the average rail salary in the UK is £45,472 per annum. The average nurse is on £31,000, and the average care home worker, which includes one of my friends, is on £20,000.
And drivers get up to 60,000 for driving trains in this country. 60,000 quid for a train driver. Not bad, is it? And
I saw lots of people claiming that wasn't the case. I mean, if you're a train driver on 60 grand, let us know. We hear these figures bandied around, and there's so much response saying, I don't get that. So what's the true picture in terms of what you're paid as a train driver? 60 grand does seem a lot.
Mick Lynch, who is the leader of the people who work on the trains, he gets 124,000. Now, I don't begrudge him that. He's the head of a big union, and he's got to look after his members' interests, and therefore they think he's the best man for the job. But he won't be suffering the sort of pain other people are suffering with a salary like that and a £900,000 house. So, you know, I think you've got to get that into perspective.
I bet he can afford to fill his car up.
I bet he can,
Let's have a look at ciggies in
Oh,
the
yes.
Times.
Yeah.
What do you think about this, Mike?
No, I don't like anything that got the word ban in it, you know what I mean? Because I think people should be free to do what they like. Cigarettes are such an interesting thing because they're not illegal, but of course they're deemed to be the most unhealthy pursuit you can have in life. I'm a very lucky smoker. I can go out for a lunch with a few friends, a few Fleet Street friends like Dawn Neeson or something like that, right? Have an old-fashioned Fleet Street lunch and then have a few cigarettes afterwards in the afternoon and then not smoke again for probably 2 months because I'm not addicted to nicotine.
Very
you know what
unusual.
I mean? It's very unusual, but it helps. Now, the problem is, what I hate about this is it's based on the New Zealand scheme. New Zealand has become a basket case country, you know, COVID lockdowns and all that kind of stuff, where they're going to try and force everybody out of smoking by this system that anyone born after 2008 would never be able to buy cigarettes legally. Well, I don't want to see a wholesale ban in this country. Make it more difficult, put the prices up if you want, put the age of smoking up to 21. But surely you can't ban it wholesale, can you?
It was tried with prohibition, wasn't it, with alcohol, and look what happened. You have a huge black market, you have illegal cigarettes flooding the market, which we all know have all sorts of nasty chemicals in them.
Yeah.
Yes, but if fewer people are smoking them...
Yeah, no, look, my dad died of lung cancer, Steve, and I
Terrible.
totally agree. I think we should increase the cost of cigarettes. But, I mean, I think I agree with Mike on this. Banning them banning makes me
It's totalitarian.
Also, where do you stop?
It's one of the few things in life, smoking,
Yeah.
where there are no benefits. I mean, drinking, you can say, well, you know, it's social, you have a nice time, you relax a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, even, you know, when they talk about legalising certain drugs, people can say, well, it makes me feel better, whatever else. Not that
some
I'm in
people
favour
smoke
of
because
that.
of their nerves. You know, they find it impossible to get through the day without 40 fags or something
Well, that's
like
only
that.
because they've got used to it, though.
Well, yeah, I suppose so. But again, with Dawn...
But it's just purely bad for you.
Yeah, but if it's available in a free society, it shouldn't be
Well,
banned.
exactly. I mean, what about high-calorie foods or fast food? I mean, what are the advantages of that, other than it's just bad for you?
But it does still provide an element of nutrition that we do have to eat.
They used to prescribe cigarettes for pregnant women, didn't they? If you were very stressed out, it was like, have a cigarette to calm down. I mean, that's within, you know, my mum's generation.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, as an ex-smoker, I just think... I mean, I understand the freedoms argument.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. And I had a cigar at my wedding and all the rest of it was all very nice.
Yeah.
But
you got the cigar?
But you do sort of think... You know, really, if you can stop people ever getting on the bandwagon, then they'd thank you for it in later
I think the
life.
government have done a very good job. It says about 15% of adults now smoke, and that you want to get that down to 5%. I'm certain when I was a young man, 50% of this country smoked.
Yeah.
So their policy to reduce smoking is working, and I would say just keep doing that, you know?
And it increased by 25% during the pandemic amongst youngsters.
Did
which
it?
I was surprised, but
Wow.
more youngsters started smoking during the pandemic. 25% that was up.
Yeah.
Why, I wonder, was that? Nothing else to do.
Nothing else to do. Stress, boredom,
No
absolutely.
pub, get a packet of fags.
Well, look, let us know your views at home on all of the subjects we've been talking about in the paper review. Dawn and Mike will be back in the next hour to take us through another newspaper review. But for now, let's bring you up to date at 6:50 on this morning's headlines.
And the Prime Minister is set to announce a string of housing reforms, including plans for lower-paid workers to use benefits to buy their homes. The PM will make a speech in Lancashire today and will commit to extending the right to buy scheme for housing association tenants.
As we've just been discussing, campaigners have formally launched legal bids to stop the government's plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. The first flight was expected to leave next Tuesday. Lawyers for more than 90 migrants have already submitted legal challenges, asking to try and stay in the UK.
The libel claim made by the Duke of Sussex against the Mail on Sunday publisher due to have its first hearing at the High Court today. Harry is suing associated newspapers after they published a story surrounding his legal case against the Home Office in regards to his security arrangements while he was visiting the UK. Now, I don't know about you, but if you're looking at flights in the summer, the prices are going up somewhat. They're not horrifically bad at the moment, but they're still pretty bad, I find. I shouldn't complain because I've just come back from a trip away, but I'm still trying to get away for a week in August.
Yeah, well, same here. The boss of Wizz Air saying up 10%, and that's assuming that your flight's going to actually take place, that you're not going to have delays, you're actually going to have to pay more. Aviation looking less and less the glamorous sort of thing to do that it used to be when we were all growing up. So does this put you off booking a holiday? After several years of people not leaving the country, people are going to think, you know what, maybe we'll just holiday here forevermore.
Yeah, glamorous. It's funny, isn't it? I mean, I never got on a plane till I was 21.
Oh, bless
you.
No, that's lovely, yeah.
It wasn't lovely. We would have loved it.
We made the most of the UK.
We had to drive everywhere. We used to drive to France.
Oh, perfect.
It took forever from the Lake District. Let's talk to travel expert Sally Gethin, who's here in the studio. Good to see you this morning. This is a bit of a depressing picture, isn't it? But I mean, you can understand why they're saying 10% to increase, you know, to recover some lost revenues, but it's not good for us.
No, it was inevitable that airfares would increase. I mean, airlines are facing a big hike in the oil, the cost of aviation fuel. So that is affecting them. And the war in Ukraine, often they have to adopt new routes, go around, and that causes delays. And then, of course, they've got to, you know, attract new hires, new staff into the industry. So all of this puts pressure
very
on ticket
quickly,
prices.
because I mean, the industry seems to be pretty much in chaos at the moment.
It is in chaos, and it's actually at that point which, in some cases, at some airports, it is at the brink of collapse if it hasn't already collapsed. And I've never seen it in this condition ever before. And unfortunately, there's no quick fix to this because these are long-term problems that even after the summer will still need resolving. For example, you know, thousands of jobs need to be filled. That's the first thing. And lots of other issues as well. With Brexit, there's more paperwork at the border, the queuing, going through security, for example. All those need fine-tuning and need to be resolved, not just this summer, but afterwards as well.
Historically, you used to have, Sally, the airlines that would cost a bit more, but you get a premium service for that. British Airways typically sort of associated with being sort of the gold star brand. Is that still the case? You pay a lot of money for a flight and you're going to get that gold star or gold standard?
Well, airlines are desperate to fill up their premium cabins now because they lost all these first-class passengers and business travellers during the pandemic. So, yes, they are desperate to have those passengers, and, yes, they will still get that first-class experience. They actually pay for the flight. They return a profit. They're high-yield passengers for airlines. But now airlines are changing the cabin layouts to introduce premium economy, for example, sort of different layers of types of tickets and airfares in order to lure passengers back on and pay more.
It's part of the problem that even when I mean, like me, I go on the cheapest flights I can get. But you do feel conned at the end of it. There's no satisfaction. You feel a bit of a con, don't you? Because you book your ticket at 100 quid, and then you've got to pay for any baggage that you want to go on. If you've got to then pay for a seat, and even if you want a basic seat, it's an extra 10 quid each way or whatever. You do feel like they're just absolutely ripping money from you rather than just, wouldn't it be better if we just knew what the price was going to be?
Yeah, some people would argue they'd rather have that choice. You know, prior to the low-cost carriers entering the market, the legacy airlines, as we call them, the very large flag carriers, used to just have one single price with everything bundled in. And then when you unbundle those prices and you say, well, you can pay extra for an extra bag, for example, and for perhaps food and beverage on board, some people like that transparency. But there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? It's all got to be paid for one way or another. So, yes, it can be really frustrating, but that's the way the industry works.
Yeah. OK, Sally, just a final word. Do you predict more trouble to come over the summer months as people try and get away for their summer holidays?
I think we are still working through the worst of it at the moment. We have to get over that hump, as it were, to get to the point where it will ease off. But I think we're looking more towards the end of the summer before things ease up. OK.
Sally Gethin, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Stay with us. We're going to be looking ahead to the Prime Minister's cost of living speech as he vows to cut household costs. That's after your forecast.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Eamonn McGivern from the Met Office. Fine at first today, sunny spells in the south and then later in the day the east as well. But rain is expected to move in from the west. That rain because of a series of weather fronts that are approaching from the west as we speak. Low pressure carrying those fronts. Used to be a tropical storm, ex-tropical storm Alex. No longer a tropical storm, just an area of low pressure in the Atlantic. But it will bring some windy weather during tomorrow and Saturday especially. Before that happens, actually, we keep the sunny skies across much of central and eastern England, parts of southwest Scotland, Cumbria as well through much of the day. Some showers will develop after a cloudy start in the east of Scotland as well as the far northeast of England. The more persistent rain arrives into western areas, and 16, 17 Celsius for Plymouth and Cardiff will feel quite cool compared to recent days. 21 Celsius, meanwhile, in the east of England, and certainly an improvement here compared to recent days. But the cloud and the rain in the west tends to push eastwards, fading away, so not much to it by the end of the night. And then, increasingly, the cloud breaks up. Still the potential for some showers in the far southeast and the far northwest, but in between clear spells and a keen breeze, that wind starting to get stronger all the while. And, of course, with that wind in place, it's not going to be a cool start to Friday. For many places, we'll look at the morning lows at 13 to 15 Celsius. So a blustery day to come tomorrow. Plenty of bright weather. For much of England and Wales, it stays dry. There'll be sunny spells, but it will be noticeably breezy. And that wind particularly strong towards the northwest. And for western Scotland, the risk of gales around exposed coasts. The showers will be lively as well for western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Risk of hail and thunder. Similar conditions on Saturday with frequent showers towards the northwest, along with a strong wind and gales for exposed coasts. Brighter skies for the rest of the UK, but breezy and feeling cool.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
we're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The Prime Minister promises to unleash the country's fiscal firepower as petrol prices see their biggest daily jump in 17 years.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 7 on Thursday, the 9th of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel and Stephen. Here's what's leading our news this morning.
Well, the Prime Minister will pledge today to cut costs in every area of household expenditure, from food to energy to transport. In a major speech on tackling the cost of living crisis, Boris Johnson is expected to say that Britain will become a strong country with a healthy economy.
The cost of filling up an average family car with petrol could hit £100 for the first time today, after the biggest daily jump in pump prices for 17 years. The RAC's fuel spokespersons warned that a peak is still some way off.
Berlin's Interior Affairs Minister has suggested that a mentally ill person running amok was to blame after a car was driven into a crowd in the city, killing a teacher and injuring 14 children. A 29-year-old man, thought to be the driver, was detained at the scene.
Do get in touch this morning. We'd love to hear your views on all of our conversations and discussions. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or you can tweet us at gbnews.
And don't forget, if you want to watch us on YouTube, please do. It's all absolutely free, and it's free as well if you subscribe. Doesn't cost you a penny, and it means we can keep you up to date with the very latest on the big stories every single day.
So our top story this hour, the Prime Minister will pledge today to help people cut costs in every area of household expenditure.
Now, it's a major speech in Lancashire that he's giving today. He's going to set out his vision for tackling the cost of living crisis, vowing to use fiscal firepower to help those who need it most, adding, "We will emerge from this a strong country with a stable economy."
Well, new forecasts from the OECD predict the UK to see the slowest growth of any country in the G20, except Russia, with 0% growth next year, prompting fears of 1970s-style stagflation.
It comes, though, as petrol prices experience their biggest daily jump in 17 years. The cost of filling up an average family car is expected to hit about £100 a day. And that's if you've got a tank of 55 litres, which, frankly, today is pretty small.
Well, for more on this, we're joined by Malcolm Grimston, Senior Research Fellow with the Centre for Environmental Policy. A very good morning to you. Look, we've been scratching our heads this morning about why exactly now we've seen this 2p leap and why we might again see it today. What's the cause for this huge rise?
I mean, the wider picture is that when the COVID crisis hit, oil prices collapsed. It's difficult to remember now, but there were tankers full of oil floating around the world, desperate to find someone to take the oil and actually prepared to pay people. Oil had a negative value. So the world stopped producing oil, largely speaking. The economy rebounded, and now you've got supply significantly outstripping demand pretty much everywhere. What particularly has happened recently, there's about a 2-week gap between the wholesale price of oil increases and that price going through to the pumps. And that's because we don't store a great deal of petrol. So when the price goes up, ultimately the pump price has to go up as well. And that's why we're seeing the particular spike just at the moment.
I tell you, no wonder people get annoyed at the petrol stations, though, because, you know, I'd forgotten about the sort of negative oil price that we had. We didn't see prices drop that dramatically at the time, did we?
Well, we did.
Not down to under £1 a litre.
It came down to about £1.08 a litre. Just after the crisis.
Maybe none of us were driving, that's why. At the time we
Indeed,
weren't allowed to go anywhere.
That was the whole point. The demand had collapsed, so we didn't get a great deal of benefit because, as you say, we weren't using it. But the price did come down very significantly at that period, and now we've seen it going back up again. So, I mean, it's not a direct collection because there are other costs, such as the green taxes and VAT, that are more or less independent of the oil price. But the fundamental driver of this is the international oil situation, and there's no sign of it getting better. We don't know what's going to happen in Ukraine, but sanctions on Russia are likely to increase rather than decrease. We've just overnight had an explosion at a gas refinery in North Texas. We don't know what sort of effect that's going to have on the gas price, which, of course, is the other side of this, our domestic power bills and gas prices. It just shows that we didn't invest enough in robustness in the system to deal with these sorts of things during the good times, and we're now paying.
What about an increase in production from those countries where we can get fuel? I mean, places like Saudi Arabia must be looking at really upping production, aren't they?
Yeah, indeed. Well, Kuwait has said that it's going to play ball with that. Interesting, going back to 2005, the last time all this happened, which was largely because of Hurricane Katrina knocking out the Gulf of Mexico. But the OPEC was involved in that and didn't increase demand as quickly as perhaps it could have done, which contributed to the last time we saw this massive spike. But the US is now exporting more oil and gas than it ever has in its its history. It has upped its fracking production as a result of this. The Saudis, I suspect, eventually will. Because ironically, it's not good for the oil industry to have high prices for too long, because then people go and do something else. So they don't like it. It's around $125 a barrel now. The average price just after the crisis was $25 a barrel, just 2 years ago, to put it into context.
What about the politicians in all of this? Because you're talking about the international picture, and it sounds very much as though everywhere is being affected by the same things. But are all countries approaching it in the same way? I mean, politicians here are saying this is down to greedy retailers, greedy wholesalers. But, you know, could politicians be doing more to help Joe Public in this crisis?
It's terribly hard to... I mean, I think that's unfair, because there may be individual people who are gaming the system, and they should be taken into account. But it's not the actual margin being made on sale of petrol is not that great for companies, because they're still, in a sense, a little bit behind what they're now having to pay for oil on the wholesale market. When you have a completely state-owned company, so France, for example, with its large, broadly state-owned nuclear programme, has been able to keep down the power price significantly lower than countries like ours, both because nuclear is not affected by the oil thing and it's more state-controlled. Since we're still basically market-driven, which has certain advantages, but it does mean that government has relatively few levers when it comes to the wider thing. Now, of course, through the benefits system, it does have powers, and the government, to be fair, has been trying to operate in that way and give help to the less well-off. But this is such a massive tide here that it's very difficult to see how government can compensate people for energy prices which are doubling or trebling.
I tell you what, it's a bit of a cold comfort in a way, but we do need to remember this isn't just us, don't we? I mean, you mentioned what's going on with the fuel prices, the energy prices in France, but I've just been in Italy, where the fuel prices at the pumps was actually, I would guess, with a euro conversion, still slightly more expensive than we were paying over here. So this isn't just us.
Sure, yeah, and there's big protests in the States because their gas price, petrol price, which is historically much lower because they don't tax it, but it's still reaching levels that the Americans are very unhappy with. And inevitably, I guess, governments get it in the neck when this happens. But this is a great, as you say, international market with international forces. It's an extremely cold comfort to know it's happening everywhere, because, of course, if it wasn't, then we could move our supplies to those countries where there wasn't such a crisis. Now, when this happened last time in the 70s with the massive oil price shocks in 73 and 79, it basically took the system a decade to adjust and to bring the oil price down to the sort of levels it was before 1973, because you need massive investment. They did it there with a lot of new nuclear, revived the coal industry in some countries, and this was before natural gas was the new kid on the block, really. Now we have renewables as another option, but investments in energy typically take several years to make and several decades to pay back. Now, at the moment, where power prices are, as long as you don't get massive things like windfall taxes interfering with the situation, then people will probably start investing, but the payoff of that investment will not be in the course of the next year.
Interesting, though, you mentioned the whole windfall tax issue. I mean, obviously, we can understand why Labour pushed for it. The government has now introduced a limited windfall tax. We can understand why they want to get their hands on the money. But in terms of future prices and economic stability and energy stability, that's not necessarily a good thing?
I'm sceptical. I mean, it's actually not that limited. It's up to 3 years. This could be something of the order of 17 billion coming from the oil and gas tax. Now, 2 years ago, BP posted a loss for the year. It'll probably actually do the same this year because it's had to write off all its Russian assets, which are several billion pounds on the books, which now clearly are worthless. And you can certainly do that. You can say to oil companies, you make a loss, we'll let you make the loss. There was some government support, to be fair, there. But if your investments pay off, then we're going to quite capriciously introduce a tax to make sure you can't enjoy them. But we'd like you to keep investing, please. We shouldn't be that surprised if they're saying, thanks, but we'll go somewhere else where we're not facing that kind of issue. Now, on the other hand, government needs money to help people, and we'd all recognise that. But as someone once said, the cure to high prices is high prices. Because that stimulates the investment to bring the prices down again in heavily capital-intensive industries. And whenever government interferes with that cycle, there is a danger that companies might lose the confidence, and then we get the worst of both worlds. High prices, but not the investment.
And you say when governments interfere in that, I mean, don't forget they are benefiting from this as well because of fuel duty. You know, there's a lot more money in the coffers, not just from the windfall tax, but just simply from taxing fuel. Anyway, look, it sounds as though, at least from what the RAC is saying, this is a problem that's only going to get worse in the short term anyway. Really interesting to get your perspective. Malcolm Grimston, Senior Research Fellow at the Centre for Energy Policy and Technology at Imperial. Thank you.
It's an interesting insight, that, isn't it? Well, let's see what's happening on the ground, as it were. Let's head to our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, who's at a fuel station in Nottingham for us this morning. Will, what are the prices there?
Good morning. Yeah, I've been driving around having a little bit of a tour. That 180 pence per litre average on petrol, it's certainly been hit here in Nottingham. Two of the petrol stations quite close to the city centre, along a couple of the main roads that you'd find in towards the city centre, in towards the M1, reaching that 180 pence per litre mark. Here at this Texaco, just behind me, 189 pence for petrol, 193 pence for diesel. Obviously, that big number that everybody's looking at is that £2 for a litre of petrol. If it reaches that level, just another penny or so, for most average retailers, it's going to go up to about £100 to fill up a family car. Of course, that's really worrying for a lot of people that might use their car for their business. They might use their car to drop the kids off at school and then go to a job or a second job for some people. The RAC says that we are a nation of car lovers. 32 million people use the car to get around, and we've got to understand that the effects of the price rises for that will potentially affect businesses in the way that they might have to pay for deliveries more. So that might mean that your sandwiches at your local cob shop might cost a little bit more as well. So it's not as simple as just the amount that you might fill up for your car. It affects businesses quite a lot as well. Now, you can still see, though, people are coming in and out of this petrol station here at Texaco. Lots of people driving around. It doesn't seem to matter as much the fact that the petrol prices are going up, because people do still need to get around, and that's why lots of people are calling on the government to take more action. Of course, we saw that 5p reduction not too long ago when we had that emergency spring budget, but people are wondering whether that's gone far enough and continues to go far enough.
OK, Will, thank you very much indeed. I went to university in Nottingham. I know exactly where Will's standing. On that corner, yeah.
I nearly went to university in Nottingham. Yeah, I went and I'd chosen where I was living, and then at the last minute, I went to Bristol.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, never mind.
I love Bristol. I got
Nice
remark, so they then let me into Bristol. Lots of my friends were going there. Anyway, we could have been at uni together. Slight age gap there, so let's go there. Anyway.
You're a bit older than me.
It's 7:14. Let's take a look at this morning's headlines for you. The Prime Minister is set to announce, as we've been saying, a string of reforms which include plans for lower-paid workers to be able to use benefits to buy their homes. Speaking in Lancashire later, Boris Johnson will commit to an extension of the Right to Buy scheme for housing association tenants.
Campaigners have formally launched legal bids to stop the government, or attempt to stop the government's plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. The first flight expected to leave next Tuesday. Lawyers for more than 90 migrants have already submitted legal challenges asking for them to be able to stay in the UK. The libel claim made by the Duke of Sussex against the Mail on Sunday publishers due to have its first hearing at the High Court later today. Harry is suing Associated Newspapers Limited after they published a story surrounding his legal case against the Home Office in regards to his security arrangements whilst visiting the UK. Fair few people getting in touch on the Right to Buy scheme. The Prime Minister's going to announce today that more people should be able to sort of buy their council house, in effect, and use benefits to do so. £30 billion, which is sort of spent on rent, could be used on people for a deposit and then paying their mortgage. Karine has been in touch. Why should hard-working people buy houses through their tax for people on benefits. It's a no from me, she says.
On fuel prices, Martin's got in touch. He says, strange the price of diesel today in Arbroath in Scotland is £1.82. The reason it's going up fast is the garages ripping us off.
That's not what the experts say.
That's not what the experts
to be
say.
fair, but I know how you feel.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of anger and frustration out there. Brett Wilkin has also got in touch on this subject. I'm a disabled person on benefits. I rely on my car and consider it an essential item. As everything gets worse, Boris pats himself on his back for still being in power. When will Boris be held accountable for all the taxpayers' money he spent saving his job, which is not what it's for? He's a thief and he needs to go.
Lots of people getting in touch on smoking, trying to make England smoke-free by 2030. I mean, I've got to say, on the surface, I think it's a good idea.
I don't think you'd say that, this morning.
Yeah,
it's funny, isn't it?
No, I sort of do. As an ex-smoker, I sort of do think it's a good idea. However, there are some issues. Mark's been in touch. What a dictator country. We can do what we do, and what we can't. If you want to smoke, then you should be able to. I'm making that a bit gobbledygook. Sorry, Mark. So there you go. Nick says the nanny state is alive and well. Stopping people smoking is the first step. Your alcohol is next. Yeah, you may have a point. I don't know. It's a tricky one because we know it's so bad for your health, and we know it's so bad for our finances in terms of some of the illnesses, heart attacks, strokes, all the rest of it.
So's not exercising, so's eating badly. How do we legislate for all of those things? At the end of the day, we're adults. We have to make our own decisions and live with the consequences. Look, get involved in the conversation. Let us know your thoughts. Plenty of you have already, and we'll try and read as many of those out as we can.
Oh, we'll get through them all.
We will. Well,
we'll get through them all.
That's a challenge.
Oh,
we'll
yes,
certainly
we will.
read them all, whether or not we read them all.
We're going to stay on air until we've got through every single one of them. Yeah, we'll go home on Wednesday. Now, Berlin's Interior Affairs Minister has said that evidence suggests it was a mentally ill person running amok who was to blame after a car was driven into a crowd in Germany's capital city yesterday.
Well, the crash killed a teacher and injured 14 children, and a 29-year-old man, believed to be the driver, was detained at the scene.
Well, let's talk to former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office, Chris Phillips, who's here. Morning to you.
Good morning.
It's good to see you. I wish we had something cheery to talk about, Chris. Look, whether this person has a mental condition or not is almost beside the point at this stage when there are people grieving. How do you even begin to secure a city like Berlin or London or anywhere else for that matter against these sort of lone wolves, as we call them?
Well, this is, as you say, the latest in these types of attack in one form or another, and mental illness is often brought out as a cause. But, of course, there's a lot of mental illness in society anyway. No, you can't protect all of society from people in vehicles in particular. But there are things you can do, and they have been done, actually, largely across the UK. If you look at big, iconic sites particularly around London, they have got some hostile vehicle mitigation measures which have been put in because of the threat of this specific type of attack.
And do you think questions might be asked then in Berlin about whether or not more mitigations should have been in place there? Because my understanding of the geography of the city is that where this happened on Rankerstrasse is quite near to where the 2016 Christmas markets driving through the crowds, horrendous terrorist attack happened and 11 people killed in that incident. I mean, did they take measures there to try and prevent similar things, or, have they not done as good a job as perhaps we have here in the UK?
Well, clearly they haven't taken huge amounts of measures because the whole idea of it is to keep vehicles away from pedestrians. But it is really difficult in a city centre. And if you look at some of our sites, often it's sites that have been rebuilt or, as an example, I live down at Hampton Court, they've just put some hostile vehicle mitigation measures on the bridge.
Oh, all right. So what are we talking about? I suppose we get the general gist from hostile vehicle mitigation, but what does that look like in practice?
Is it plant pots?
Yeah, well, it doesn't necessarily need to be bollards. That's the key thing. There are three aspects to this. If you want to stop a vehicle from being able to hit people, you have to either slow it down or reduce it in size, and that will reduce the kinetic energy. Now, if you allow vehicles to travel at high speeds, then you have to have really strong barriers to protect members of the public. It doesn't need to be barriers, though, because often you'll have benches, you can have bus stops. In fact, a number of British companies have got lots of vehicle mitigation measures, which actually, to all intents and purposes, look like normal street furniture.
Yeah. It's so frightening, isn't it, to think that just an ordinary car can be used as such a deadly weapon. Lots of people will have seen the interview yesterday with John Barrowman. He was a witness in all of this yesterday. And what would the advice be to anybody who finds themselves caught up in an awful incident, albeit, you know, whether it's terrorist or a mental health sort of lone wolf? I mean, he was talking about how they were sort of being warned, well, there might be another vehicle. I mean, what should you do if you start to... I mean, he also talked about how it wasn't immediately apparent what was going on. There was sort of lots of confusion. It's because it was multiple sites and obviously children involved as well. I mean, what would your advice be if you do find yourself?
I mean, Isabel, it is a very difficult situation when you're caught up in one of those and you don't initially know what's happening, to be quite frank. If you think back to the Nice attack where the truck barreled along on Bastille Day, that was quite incredible. But the key thing is this: actually having a bit of spatial awareness will give you some protection. I think one of the biggest things we see these days is people walking around with their phones, looking at the phones, headphones in, not actually aware of what's going on around them. And it's not only vehicles mounting pavements that are a threat. Of course, it's robberies, it's muggings, all that sort of thing. So actually being aware of what's going on around you is a really good starting point. But then actually thinking through what you would do if something big did happen, because you've only got split seconds to react, and if that reaction has already been thought through, you're more likely to do it.
Yeah, so, I mean, I suppose just get away from the danger.
Yeah, I mean...
It's the clear sort of...
People were being told to get behind trees if they could.
Yeah, well, anything will give you some kind of shelter. The point is, you're absolutely right, Stephen. The further you are away from any kind of terrorist attack, whether it's a gun, a knife or a bomb or a vehicle, the more chance you've got of surviving it. And moving away is your best option.
Yeah, I mean, so many people these days in sort of these situations whip out their phones and start filming it. Now, whilst as journalists that's helpful for us to tell a story, really, you put your phone away and get the heck out of there, right?
No, absolutely. And what we've seen is people, as you say, standing over a bomb with their camera out, trying to take a picture of it to get on TikTok or something, which is completely crazy. And people do need to understand the threat of terrorism and these types of incidents is still very, very high. I mean, the government are telling us that there's a substantial threat, which means it could happen at any time, and people need to be aware of that.
That's part of the problem, though, isn't it? Because we do very well in this country at thwarting attacks, and of course we normally don't hear about it.
That's I know.
In a sense, do you think we could almost do with hearing a bit more about stuff that is prevented, so that we don't just relax into thinking everything's fine?
Well, I agree with you to some extent, but you don't want people to live in fear.
No.
What we want to do is carry on our business. Listen, if terrorists frighten us into doing stuff, then actually they've won anyway. So it is a case of understanding it's out there. You will find there's a complacency that exists. I mean, I speak to companies all the time, and a few weeks after an incident, it's all forgotten and they're back to business as usual. And that is a bit of a concern, because particularly now there's new legislation coming into play in the next few months. I think companies, particularly those that organise events, need to really think it through.
And just lastly, just off the back of the Jubilee weekend here in the UK, I mean, we were speaking last week on this programme. Big relief, isn't it, that it all went without any huge incidents, security incidents, because these things always carry a big risk, don't they?
It's a massive risk, and of course the police have done a great job there, and the security services, and all that went off and there's no real thanks to the police for doing a great job. I mean, we take these things for granted. In London, a march, a demonstration, or one of these sort of events is happening almost every day, and the police are having to deal with that.
Hats off to them.
Look, really good to see you, as always. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Well, coming up, we're going to take you through all the latest sports stories. Ada McGee is here this morning. First, though, here's your weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Ada McGivern from the Met Office. Fine at first today, sunny spells in the south and then later in the day the east as well, but rain is expected to move in from the west. That rain because of a series of weather fronts that are approaching from the west as we speak. Low pressure carrying those fronts. Used to be a tropical storm, ex-tropical storm Alex, no longer a tropical storm, just an area of low pressure in the Atlantic, but it will bring some windy weather during tomorrow and Saturday especially. Before that happens, actually, we keep the sunny skies across much of central and eastern England, parts of southwest Scotland, Cumbria as well through much of the day. Some showers will develop after a cloudy start in the east of Scotland as well as the far northeast of England. The more persistent rain arrives into western areas, and 16, 17 Celsius for Plymouth and Cardiff will feel quite cool compared to recent days. 21 Celsius, meanwhile, in the east of England, and certainly an improvement here compared to recent days. But the cloud and the rain in the west tends to push eastwards, fading away, so not much to it by the end of the night. And then, increasingly, the cloud breaks up. Still the potential for some showers in the far southeast and the far northwest, but in between clear spells and a keen breeze, that wind starting to get stronger all the while. And, of course, with that wind in place, it's not going to be a cool start to Friday. For many places, we'll look at the morning lows at 13 to 15 Celsius. So a blustery day to come tomorrow. Plenty of bright weather. For much of England and Wales, it stays dry. There'll be sunny spells, but it will be noticeably breezy. And that wind particularly strong towards the northwest. And for Western Scotland, the risk of gales around exposed coasts. The showers will be lively as well for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Risk of hail and thunder. Similar conditions on Saturday with frequent showers towards the northwest, along with a strong wind and gales for exposed coasts. Brighter skies for the rest of the UK, but breezy and feeling cool.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio. On digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Ooh, 7:29. We're
Time's
slightly
flying.
premature, aren't we? I mean, but anyway, look, there's lots to come on today's programme still.
It's National Carers Week. At 7:45, we're going to be speaking to a really inspiring young carer. He looks after his brother, his sister, and his dad. So much to be doing at the tender age of 18.
Yeah, it's nothing to do with EasyJet.
I might be wishing
Don't
he
know
was
what
going on
those pictures
holiday.
were about. There you
yeah.
go. We'll try and sort that out for you. Also coming up in the next hour, as Pride Month celebrations kick off, we'll meet the Stonewall founder who says there's still a long way to go when it comes to equality.
And let us know your thoughts on all of the topics we discussed this morning. Email us gbnews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
Now, let's get the very latest on the sport for you this morning. Aidan McGee is here. Morning.
Morning. What a treat for a Thursday, eh?
It is a treat for a Thursday. It's very good to have you. Can we talk football?
Yeah, why not? There's some live matches last night. A little bit after the Lord Mayor's show, if I'm allowed to coin that horrible cliche on air, live on air. But yeah, Wales played Netherlands last night. They lost it quite late on. The issue here is that Wales had a massive game on Sunday. They played against Ukraine. They got through to the World Cup at the expense of, obviously, a war-torn nation. It was, I wouldn't say controversial, but it was also almost bittersweet in a way. And then suddenly 3 days later, you've got this Nations League game against Holland at home. And it's kind of, I mean, it wasn't the same players exactly. There were a lot of injuries as well. But it was kind of, you know, the whole point of having a competitive tournament like the Nations League at this time is so that the international nations or the federations can go to the clubs and say, you know what, when we want your players at the end of a long, long season, but they're not friendlies, it's a competitive game. But it's not fooling anyone, Isabel, you know? It's not fooling anyone. These are just glorified friendlies, to be honest. If they were serious games, you wouldn't play your reserve team.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, Wales lost the game 2-1 late on. Scotland had a game against Armenia. A couple of their top players hung on after their defeat against Ukraine last week, probably because I felt that they wanted to put some right some wrongs. Andy Robertson stayed in Liverpool and John McGinn from Aston Villa. They won 2-0. They were quite comfortable. The third goal didn't quite happen in the second half. But and England were involved, of course, the previous day with Germany. And that segues into the golf, actually.
Yes.
Because I don't know if you've seen in the last couple of days about the Live Tour.
Yeah.
Backed by the Saudi Public Investment Fund. Your friends and mine, you know, they bought Newcastle United back before Christmas. Hugely controversial. They're stacking loads and loads of money into creating this kind of alternative golf tour to the PGA Tour. Bit similar to the Premier League in some ways 30 years ago when it broke away from the Football League. It was all about money. Now, we had a spectre yesterday of 3 experienced golfers, Phil Mickelson, Ian Poulter, who's English, and Lee Westwood, who's English, sitting up on a platform in a press conference. Neil McClellan from the Mirror, master of his craft, a really good friend of mine, had them really on the ropes because he said to them, look, is there any tournament you wouldn't play in? And they said, that's hypothetical. And then he said, well, OK, imagine if Vladimir Putin started a tournament, would you play in that one? Hypothetical, no comment. Now,
what? How can you not have a comment on that? I mean,
this is ridiculous.
What's controversial? But why can't they just?
So he made it less hypothetical, and he actually brought in. He said, "Would you have played under apartheid South Africa?" I mean, that did actually happen. We didn't dream it. I guess it's before these players' times, and I suppose because they weren't able to compete, and it is hypothetical in some ways. But even then, they said no comment. Now, just be honest. Just say, look. Yeah. I'm here for a few quid. These players are over the hill.
A few quid?
Yeah, a few quid. Yeah, I mean, let's have a look at some of the numbers, shall we?
So are you saying they basically would?
Oh yeah, they of course. Well, yeah, effectively, yeah, because I mean, you know, we don't want to be moral arbiters on this desk or anything, but I mean, Saudi's record in human rights is absolutely abominable. So, but the money's right. So these players are playing. So just be honest. Just say, look, we all have a pound note. We're playing here. We're professionals. We're playing. What Rory McIlroy kind of alluded to yesterday because he's remained on the PGA Tour. And he's saying they've got an event this week in Toronto. So that's the other situation. You've got 5 of the top 10 top world players in Toronto this week, and you've got the other 5 starting against the Centurion Club in St Albans today. So Rory McIlroy said those players are there because they've been offered boatloads of cash. So just be honest about it, and then...
Is he saying he wouldn't do that then?
He's saying at the moment, yeah, but sometimes you're going to... Well, not sometimes. Look, he's made a few quid out of it already, don't get me wrong, but soon down the line, if the figures just stack up so it's unavoidable, it's almost like you can't turn it down. Well, you know, he's going to have a decision to make because if there are players who are 20 places down from him in the world rankings earning 4 times what he does because they've decided to go to the Live Tour, then where does that leave him? He'll probably just think, well, you know, hang on a minute, I'm the world number 5 or whatever, I should be getting more.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting, isn't it?
What would you do in that situation?
I think
it's a good question.
Most of us would take them on. I mean, I think we maybe make a choice when it came to, you know, dodgy regimes. You might go if it's something really dodgy.
Well,
but otherwise,
come on,
if someone offers you 200 million quid, 400 million quid, you just take it.
The reason I segued from the football is because while these journalists did a great job putting these golfers on the rack yesterday, and they made them look like absolute. I'm not going to say what they look like, but it's quite clear from the footage. You'll make your own opinions. They were completely stumped. They were squirming up on that stage. And I guess they're reconciling it. In fact, look, if I can just ride out this storm for a little while, the money will be there in my account and it will all be worth it. But the reason I segue from the football is because it'd be interesting to see where these journalists, come November, are criticising the football team in the same way for going to Qatar.
Yeah.
I mean, they had a huge opportunity, England and the other associations around Europe. They've known that this World Cup is corrupt for 11 years now. Yeah. It's not suddenly been struck upon them, landed upon them. They've known that it's going to play havoc with the football season. That's another reason to object to it, but they've just gone along with it. And they've seen the steady sort of Middle Eastern investment involvement in sport, almost in golf, football, golf, even cricket, etc., etc. And the list will go on. So will those journalists hold the footballers to account? You know, are they going to wear? How are the footballers going to wear their rainbow laces and their rainbow armbands and protest about anything else they want to talk about taking the knee, etc., etc.? How's that going to go down in Qatar? It's worthy of questions, but I don't know if Gareth Southgate's going to get those questions.
No, maybe not.
We'll see.
We'll see. Aidan, thank you very much indeed.
Yes, nice to see you.
Are you in tomorrow?
I am indeed, yeah. No, sorry, no, I'm in on Saturday.
Saturday, excellent. See you then.
Take care.
Look, stay with us. We're going to take a quick break. After that, we're going to go through the papers again. This morning, we're joined by Dawn Neeson and Mike Parry. Likely to be lively. See you in a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's 7:37. It's my favourite time in the programme when we review your morning newspapers. This morning we're joined by the broadcaster, Mike Parry, and the former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson. Welcome back.
It might be your favourite time of the programme. That's because the first story on the list that I can see, Dawn, is about love pills. Reviving your marriage.
I don't need pills to make me
Let's
love.
take like love pills, Stephen. Come on, love.
Love.
Love. Right, okay.
What love pills are we talking about here, Dawn?
This is obviously not aimed at you, Stephen.
No.
3
You
weeks
don't
in
need to
today.
revive
Happy
your-
3-week wedding
Happy 3
anniversary.
Thank you very much indeed, yes.
Still going strong. I didn't know
I
that'd be a thing. Any case.
The first thing she said to me when she walked in an hour ago was, "Are you divorced yet?"
36 years in, sorry to,
well, exactly.
you would know a thing or two
Isabel and
about
I
a happy
are old
marriage.
hands at this.
Yeah, we are.
We know what you're.
Less of the old.
Any case, this is the front page of the Times, and it's in other newspapers as well, and it's some fun. We're allowed to have fun, evidently. This is she's Dr. Anna Machin. She's an anthropologist at the University of Oxford, and she has said that in 3 to 5 years' time, love pills will be available for couples to get together and to improve their relationships, to remain happy.
So it is about love and not about...
It's not Viagra.
It's not, not that you need that either, probably, Stephen. These are on the horizon. Basically, she has said it's the cuddle hormone, drugs that encourage you to have the cuddle hormone, Stephen.
Yes.
Is that oxytocin?
It is, absolutely. I'm glad you said it. I didn't want to pronounce it.
But you squirt it up your nose. That doesn't sound very romantic to me.
Oh, my gosh.
You know, I want to get in the mood. I'll just give it a...
Do that.
Yeah, never know. Needs moss, Mike. Needs moss.
As you were.
Thank you very much, boys. Calm down there.
Yes.
Basically, it's a version of MDMA, the ecstasy drug.
Of what?
Oh. Crikey. Wasn't expecting that.
Well, that's what it is.
What, legally?
Yeah. Legally, yeah. We're talking 3 to 5 years' time.
Seems to know a lot about this subject.
Well. Heckling in the ranks. Sorry, Dawn.
Honestly, yes. Boys, do calm down. So basically, in 3 to 5 years' time, it's a version of, and it helps produce the oxytocin, which makes you feel happy and love. And you, as Mike's quite rightly said, you squirt it up your nose, a bit like having a glass of Prosecco. Not that you squirt that up your nose, by the way.
Well, I do sometimes when I get excited.
Go out, yes, that's enough about your weekend. And it is meant to help you feel more inclined to fall in love and have a, and sort of like meet people and be nice and relax. Stephen, stop looking at me like that. And even if you are in a long-term relationship, Isabel, it's meant to help with the cuddles.
Can you get it on the drip, Isabel?
I tell you what, as a journalist, I've identified a couple of problems with this story. It's called the love pill, but you squirt it up your nose. Well, how do you squirt a pill up your nose? Sorry, number one.
Oh, come on, stop being so pedantic now. I'm sure you can. I'm not going to do that joke. But you can do whatever you want with it. But evidently,
it's all well and good if you turn out that you've married the wrong person. Then good luck with that.
No. Look, 3 weeks in, you're not qualified yet to talk about how to keep the cuddles going after decades.
Come back in 2 weeks' time and tell us.
Someone who gets married at the age of 48 knows a little bit about romance before.
Yeah, I'm
so
sure.
Believe you me, you know when you find the right one.
Oh,
go on, tell us about the others.
No.
I'm amazed at the number of my friends now of my age who admit now they need a little blue pill on a very regular basis. You know what I mean?
They had to go there. They had to.
Well, I didn't realise it was so normal.
And we're on to Viagra.
It was so widely used. Yeah.
No, well, it's interesting that, isn't it? That it's one of those. It's the great taboo that. Men don't
absolutely,
talk about.
absolutely. That's right. Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with it. If you know nothing. Help, boys. Yeah.
Right.
Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. What's happening over at Radio 2, Mike?
Right. Well, this is a story about Tony Blackburn. Tony Blackburn, in my opinion, is as important to the development of music as the Beatles, OK? He was around when the Beatles came along in the 60s, and the Rolling Stones, and The Who, and he's been with us ever since, OK? So it's an absolute disgrace that his show on Friday night on Radio 2 is being moved, if not got rid of. The former Top of the Pops presenter has fallen foul of plans to turn Friday evenings on Radio 2 into party night. As Tony is, I think he's 79 now, he is 79, maybe parties are not his thing anymore, if you see what I mean. Maybe sitting behind a deck and putting on, spinning a few discs from the 60s is his thing. I, for one, am a huge fan of Tony Blackburn. I think he's added so much colour to my life, not just as one of the original DJs who was on Radio Caroline and at Radio 1, but more recently, of course, in the Jungle and all that kind of stuff. He's been a constant in my life. He's been as constant as the Queen.
My Uncle Tony. Tony went
because
we have some we have quite a lot of our things in common.
That's right, yeah.
In Tony.
He used to review the papers for me on my old job.
Oh, OK.
And my favourite Tony Blackburn trivia is that for nearly 3, maybe 4 decades, he's eaten vegetable soup out of a tin every single day.
What, with a spoon?
Yeah, well, no, just that he doesn't like to eat. He said if he could take a pill to eat, he would. But he eats tin soup every single day for nearly 40 years.
But anyway, there is a bit of good news here. From July the 15th, his programme, Golden Hour, will air instead on Sundays at 7 p.m. But also, a second DJ is also very famous, Gary Davis, is having his show moved as well from Friday to Sunday to follow Tony Blackburn. So we're not losing them forever, but Friday night, I mean, it is party night, isn't it? And you're far more likely to want to tune into Tony Blackburn on Friday than on Sunday, because, of course, Sunday is the day of rest, and we all get religious, don't we?
Do you ever rest?
Gary Davis, do you remember?
You don't know what that is, do you, Dawn?
Yeah, Gary Davis, yeah.
I was just going to say, though, but it's this drive for the youth market, isn't it, that the Beatles are obsessed with?
Well, they're doing that on local radio. I mean, and local radio is not the place for the youth market.
And what 20-year-olds are going to sit in on a Friday like this for BBC Radio 2 in any
I couldn't name a 20-year-old DJ in this country, though, because that's my generation. Don't they realise that my generation are numerous? We've got the Grey Pound, you know, we've got the experience of listening to all the music of the last 60 years. Why treat us like we're second-class citizens when it comes to listening to music?
They can listen to GB News on the radio.
They certainly
all
can.
Their problems will be solved.
Yeah, it's a really good idea, that. Well done.
But we won't play you many songs, unfortunately, on a Friday night. But it will be
burst into song every now and then.
Well, actually, it's Patrick Christie's on a Friday
He's
night.
very
Friday
funny.
night feast, so that will keep you
He's
entertained.
outrageous.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Sick notes.
I love the way you said that in tune. Right, OK, yeah, we're going to get serious now. This is our page 4 of the Daily Mail. Now you can get a chemist to write you out your sick note. Pharmacists and nurses at GPs clinics will be allowed to sign. Now, they're not actually called sick notes anymore. I didn't even realise this until I read this story.
What are they called now?
They are called fit notes.
Oh.
This was a
Or
change that
unfit.
happened the other year. It's basically a GP has to sign you to be fit to go back to work rather than sick to take time off work. And last year, GPs issued 10 million fit notes, which have replaced sick notes. Now, this is a drive to get GPs seeing patients again and actually concentrate on what they need to. Because, I mean, a fit note you can probably do over the phone or, as they're doing here, popping into your chemist. You don't need to see a doctor to do
But you've got to get the chemist to write it, and then you've got to get your doctor to sign it.
No. Evidently, the chemist is now allowed to sign you up.
Yeah.
Crikey.
Yes. So basically, it's
powers to the pharmacy.
It's in theory, absolutely, which is a good thing. However, pharmacists are already under an awful lot of pressure. They're taking on a lot more jobs in any case. The queue around the block outside my local pharmacy in East London is already fairly horrendous. You have to wait half an hour to get through the door these days. Meanwhile, the GPs is still done up like Fort Knox with hazard warning tape. You can't get in there. Telephone appointment in 3 weeks' time if you're not dead yet. So the theory is that we will now get more of us get to see our GPs in face-to-face appointments when we need to see them. So it's given them more time. Whether that will actually happen or not is another matter.
But this is a lead swingers charter, isn't it? It's a lead swingers charter. Already, when you're going to see a doctor and say, "Oh, doctor, I've got a bad back. Can you sign me off for 7 days?" Every doctor will tell you it's impossible to diagnose whether you have got a bad back or whether you're swinging the lead. So if that's a doctor's point of view, the old chemist, who's more used to putting together packets of aspirin and this sort of stuff, how is that pharmacist going to tell whether you have actually got a bad back or not? He's not even a trained medical person. It's a lead swingers charter.
To be fair,
lead swingers charter.
Pharmacists are very highly trained.
They are, but they're not trained in the development of the spinal cord in a human body, are they? So when you go in and say, "Oh, look, doc, can't you see? I've got a bad back. I need 7 days off." What can a pharmacist do to disprove this? Can he call you a liar and say, "I don't believe you've got a bad back. You're lying. I'm not giving you a note"? That would cause a riot.
The other worrying story on the same page in the Daily Mail is where the state we are with trying to get our medical care at the moment is a nightmare of an A&E wait with a 13-hour
13-year feels like it's a lot.
13 years.
A 13-hour wait, Isabel, and it's like, you know, the fact that you can't get to see a GP now is putting so much pressure on A&Es, and I've got friends who's a paramedic, and at the end of their tether, because people are going to A&E using paramedics rather than seeing GPs, which should open up now, please. Why not?
Yeah.
Yes. Can we talk about Love Island?
Yes.
I bet Michael Owen wishes his daughter had a sick note.
I mean,
Why?
Love Island. I mean, honestly, I mean, it's. I just think it's awful that we sort of. This is what we class as entertainment.
Do you know what? I so totally agree with you, Stephen. I mean, in a modern civilised society, we're actually watching a programme which is basically encouraging young people to end up having sex with each other. That's the basic premise, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the basic premise. And to try and tease them into fancying somebody, or do you fancy him, and work up jealousies. Anyway, it's no wonder that Michael Owen, one of the greatest England footballers of all time, Michael Owen could have cracked the goal-scoring record if he hadn't had such bad injuries during the course of his career, which it looks like Harry Kane is about to take over. But anyway, back to this. Michael Owen said he travelled to Germany to watch England play so he didn't have to watch daughter Gemma on Love Island. Like any father of a young daughter, she's 19, she's very attractive, she's an influencer, which is a new modern sort of career that young ladies do, and she's in Love Island. And can you blame her father for not wanting to sit there? As Stephen's just said, watching his daughter being enticed into a physical relationship with another hunky, guy that she's never met before in her life, in order to titillate the whims of millions of viewers across the world.
Sounding a little bit prim and proper. There's loads of marriages that have come out, and indeed babies from other...
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised there's loads of babies.
Yeah, but many more that haven't. Many more that haven't.
Found on there.
I think it's almost like sponsored, pick-up time, isn't it? All that kind of stuff,
Can I just say,
get it on, or you could win 50 grand.
Calm down. Oh, for God's sake.
Just stick to the Viagra.
I think it's a nice bit of innocent fun is
not
crazy.
innocent
fun. They're so prude.
I know.
Honestly, I think
Millions of people disagree.
I think it's a disgrace.
Oh my
well,
goodness.
I think it's very close to that. I mean, there's no morality in it, Dawn. So I can see where your moral compass lies.
Did you actually watch the show? I mean, like, you know, there is.
I watched it for 10 seconds and switched off.
Yeah,
I had
you
to.
can tell because people, they're just human beings. At the end of the day, there are moral codes of behaviour, and that's explored within the programme.
Strutting about with next to nothing on.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's immoral.
Yeah.
And then, you're at the beach,
honestly, that full-length burkini. I'm going
make sure
for
you get it out. Otherwise, you're immoral.
They're all meant to look dim, aren't they? They're all portrayed as dimbos. They might not be dimbos, but the way the programme's done it, they're all portrayed as, yeah, you are, hey, that's all they seem to say.
One of them's a microbiologist.
Yeah.
We've had Dr.
Well, you know, there is the exception to the rule, obviously.
Yeah, but I mean,
I'm just
there's always
saying.
the other one. I do think it's terrible. And I wonder where TV's going, because you've got that, you've got wedding at first sight and all this sort of stuff.
Yes.
I mean, what is the world coming to?
This is what Michael Owen's up against. It came on Tuesday night's episode. Tuesday night's episode showed 19-year-old Gemma controversially coupling up with David, who's 27, who stole her from her former partner, Liam. And Michael, 42, groaned during the match coverage. I came all the way to Germany to try and avoid all that. I don't blame him.
Can I just say, for two gentlemen, I'm using that term loosely, who are completely disinterested in this subject, you're talking a lot about.
You don't seem to mind, but for two women who you would think would be sort of quite feminist, you don't seem to mind these young girls being passed about like chocolate, stolen from one to the other.
They're women who've chosen to take part. They end up often quite affluent off the back of it. Plenty of them have got brains between ears. I'm just saying.
And can I
it's all about the money.
And the men are parading around looking gorgeous as well. Not that I've noticed. Obviously, David is quite fit, though, isn't he?
Hang on, David in one day has dropped one girl and shacked up with another. What is this all about? It's like a zoo. It's like watching a zoo. Zoo, see?
Do you ever feel like you're working with your dad?
Sometimes,
Or possibly your granddad?
No, I don't know. I think there's something...
hilarious.
I think it's lax morals.
I think it lacks morals, and I think it's distinctly distasteful.
Yeah.
I also think it will influence the behaviour of millions of young people, and the moral compass of this country will be awkwardly bent by this programme, in my view.
With you all the way on that. I absolutely am.
Like the 1950s called, they want you back.
No. Nothing wrong with having a moralistic point of view, Dawn. That might have escaped you.
There you go. All those youngsters, poor old Michael Owen, his daughter's now immoral. There you go.
Well, her father is very worried about her being involved in immoral activity. Otherwise, he'd sit there every night and look at it and say, I'm so proud of my daughter. Yeah.
Let us know your views this morning.
Well, don't know what you're laughing for.
No, either.
I don't. Honestly, I
don't. No, I don't either. You take this so lightly.
We're trying to move on.
I mean, you regard it as normal behaviour. If we all behaved like that, right, we would all be in the cesspit
I don't know where
society.
To start. I
We'd
just
be in
don't
the
know where to
cesspit of society.
I just don't understand what they're laughing at. Look, we're going to leave it there. Thank you both very much indeed. Let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, this week is Carers Week in the UK, an annual campaign to highlight the challenges unpaid carers face and recognise the contribution they make to families and communities throughout the country.
Well, Noah Pooley is a young carer and he looks after his brother, his sister and his dad. And he joins us this morning, I'm pleased to say, alongside Vicky Booth, who's a young person's support practitioner for Action for Children. Very good morning to both of you. Welcome to the programme. And especially to you, Noah. I really want to celebrate and highlight what you do because, my goodness, how lucky your family are to have you. And I'm sure you don't see it as a chore, but it can't be easy as a youngster having that kind of responsibility.
Thank you. No, it's definitely, especially during like the last couple of years with COVID and stuff, it's been kind of quite an isolated thing that a lot of young people have ended up having to do. And personally myself as well, like obviously, as you mentioned earlier, that I care for quite a few of my family members. So taking on that role and kind of having the no break away from it just because we was all stuck in that caring role. And yeah, it is quite a high responsibility, and people like schools and stuff also sometimes don't quite understand the high responsibility some of us take up on the outside life.
Look, Vicky, a remarkable young man, and many of young people like him across the country. What can you do to provide the support that someone like Noah needs?
Yeah, so with Action for Children, we have a lot of young carer services across the UK, We're very lucky in Wales. We've got quite a few spread across the Wales, all the way Bridgend, Pembrokeshire, up in North Wales as well. And we offer respite breaks for our young carers. We offer support groups. We offer the Young Carers ID card, which has been launched across Wales. We offer in-school support, so we go and do drop-in sessions. We're an extra person that young carer can talk to when they need it. So if they are having a really tough day at school and they don't want to speak to their teachers, they can't go home to speak to their parents, they will come to us and speak to us, and we can offer that support.
You know her in the past. Have there been days when you've been, having a really tough time with all that you're trying to juggle, and then, trying to balance that with being, you're 18 now, but at times, a kid trying to cope with just the usual playground stuff or just facing exams or whatever it might be?
Yeah, especially when it came up to like GCSEs and stuff. I think that's kind of where it hit me a lot more, because at home there wasn't really necessarily a certain place that I could go and do revision stuff for exams, and even just stuff like homework and stuff, like you'll be given it, but there isn't that way of just being able to go home and do it, because I was in care once I got home, and now use school kind of as a break. And I think as well at break times and stuff, during especially like year 10 and year 11, I would end up using a lot of my break times and stuff in classrooms, catching up on stuff I can't do at home. So it actually then ended up meaning that I wasn't actually spending as much time with my friends as a lot of the others could do in school, and even though they could also spend time with their friends a lot more than me outside of school as well.
Any benefits to this, Noah, in the sense that you are clearly a responsible, thoughtful, caring young man. Now, it may be tough in many respects, but this is setting you up for a good life, isn't it? You're someone we can all learn from.
Yeah, definitely. So, with growing up as a young carer, because some people, like some of my friends, they kind of got forced into it just through stuff that's happened. But with me, I grew up as a young carer. And I think it's definitely, or even the last few months now, with the heart of a young carer of always looking for problems and trying to sort them and fix them and being there for people, I've actually ended up like trying to venture out and set up my own organisation to help young voices as well. Wow. So it's definitely kind of sets up people for the success and for kind of opening your hearts to sometimes the situations that the world will kind of ignore a lot more.
I love that idea, opening up your heart to those sorts of situations. Noah, if there's someone watching this at home and they're really struggling, perhaps they can relate to you, they're a youngster with more than a youngster should have to deal with, or perhaps they are not able to go to work because they're caring for elderly relatives, whatever it may be. What would you say to them? Where can they get support? And how would you sort of encourage them to carry on through the dark times?
So, first of all, get support. There are quite a few people out there, like for young carers, for example, Action for Children run stuff right over the UK, and also there's other support networks as well. So if they do have confidence to speak to their schools or youth workers, or even if they just see even PCSOs or police officers and stuff, hopefully a lot of them will be aware at least of that support that's out there for them. But even if they do already have that support and are struggling, and maybe they're a young carer, or even if they're other types of people that just have a lot on at home or a lot on for GCSEs or A-levels or anything like that, just keep going, push through it, and just try and spend that time talking to friends and talking to even adults, where sometimes you may feel like it's a bit judgmental from the adults, but just listen to what they're saying and just actually go, hang on a second, I can use their advice, apply it to my life in my own way.
Yeah, well, look, everything you say makes perfect sense, Noah. You're a remarkable young man, really good to talk Action for Children. It's great to see you both this morning.
Yeah, wise head on his shoulders there, does Noah have.
Don't go anywhere. All the top stories heading your way in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio. On digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The Prime Minister promises to unleash the country's fiscal firepower as petrol prices see their biggest daily jump in 17 years.
Morning to you. It is 8:01 on Thursday, the 9th of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel and Stephen, and this is what we've got for you today.
The Prime Minister will pledge to cut costs in every area of household expenditure, from food to energy to housing. In a major speech on tackling the cost of living crisis, Boris Johnson is expected to say that Britain will become a strong country with a healthy economy.
The cost of filling up an average family car with petrol could hit £100 for the first time today after the biggest daily jump in pump prices for 17 years. The RAC's fuel spokesperson has warned the peak is still some way off.
A substantial public health response is required to help combat monkeypox as the UK ups its severity level to the same as leprosy. The number of UK cases has now risen to 321.
We'd love to hear from you this morning. Loads of you getting in touch on actually just about everything we've talked about today. Some telling me off for being too firm on the smoking thing. Well, that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their view. Take it all on board here at GB News. Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or send us a tweet at GB News.
And you can subscribe to the GB News channel on YouTube to get all the latest on the big stories everyone's talking about.
So the main news this morning, and the Prime Minister is going to pledge to help people cut costs in every area of household expenditure.
In a major speech in Lancashire today, he'll set out his vision for tackling the cost of living crisis, vowing to use fiscal firepower to help those who need it most, adding, "We will emerge from this a strong country with a stable economy."
While new forecasts from the OECD predict the UK will see the slowest growth of any country in the G20 except Russia. 0% growth next year, apparently, so that's prompting fears of a 1970s-style stagflation.
And this comes, of course, as petrol prices experience their biggest daily jump in 17 years, with the cost of filling up an average family car expected to hit £100 today.
Well, let's talk to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who's here in the studio. Good to see you, Tom. The PM is promising an awful lot today. What is he actually going to deliver?
That's a key distinction. The Prime Minister today is intending to set out a vision, trying to show that the government is going to sort of reset itself, move forward on a lot of these areas that people really care about. But when it comes to the detail of these policies, in most areas, we might have to wait a little bit longer. We're going to hear some detail with regards to housing association right to buy. That's a policy that was floated back in February, but we're going to get some more meat on the bones of that. But in other areas, it's more the broad brushstrokes that we'll hear today. The mission of this government that has been a little bit confused over the last last couple of years will be set out in clearer strides, and then it will be for future weeks for each area to then see the detail. We're expecting, for example, a speech on the economy maybe next week or the week after now.
But that seems a little bit confused in and of itself. In the housing issue, which we've had a fair amount of detail on, as you say, seems to be levelling up agenda, which is a fair point, and yet what most people are looking at the moment is the immediate cost of living crisis.
Certainly, and there are lots of areas that the Prime Minister is expected to speak about today, the cost of childcare, for example, being one important one, where the cost of living is obviously rising and indeed touching on fuel costs, no doubt, too. But when it comes to dealing with those issues, we're going to hear the approach that the government may take. Now, that doesn't mean the nitty-gritty, that doesn't mean the details, but it does mean that you'll get a sense of where the government is going on this as time goes on. And then this is the plan over the next few weeks, that the government ramps up this policy-driven agenda to try and get things back on track, steering away from Westminster tittle-tattle and towards policy outcomes.
Yeah, how much of a challenge is it going to be to persuade the general public that the policy outcomes will produce fiscal firepower and a strong and stable economy, when just 24 hours ago you got the OECD saying that we could well have 0% growth last year, the worst of any developed country after Russia, which is obviously being heavily sanctioned?
Yes, it's an extraordinary position, and it's a very tricky one for the government, because on the one hand, the government wants to point to the good factors in our economic outlook, the record low unemployment, for example. But if it talks about all of the good things in the economy, it looks like it's out of touch with the very real issues that our economy faces, the sclerotic growth being the primary one. Now, there are meant to be sort of tiny little bits of growth next year that are cancelled out then by a bit of a dip as well. We've heard the Chancellor say that things are expected to get a little bit better in the years after that in the long-term forecasts, but really it doesn't look good. And actually we're worried, very worried, about this potential for stagflation, inflation remaining high, growth remaining low, living standards falling. It's a real challenge, and we're going to be hearing, I think, some more from this joint number 10 Treasury initiative to try and steer a way through this, to try and rev up the engines of the United Kingdom economy. But we're not going to hear the detail of that today. This is something that is a longer-term project, but I think it is something that is becoming a bigger issue and one that's more at the forefront of the government's mind.
Isn't it interesting, though, at a time when Boris Johnson is being pressured to be more conservative in his policies? I mean, how do you deal with stagflation? Well, you cut interest rates, you reduce the size of the state, and that stimulates growth. You reduce taxes significantly. That's going to be something which actually he could do, be seen to be more conservative, and get the economy growing again, potentially.
Although the problem with cutting interest rates, of course, even further, and they're pretty low as things stand, is that boosts inflation. And to some extent, there may well need to be a bit of a fiscal tightening on the government side of things, and on the Bank of England side of things, potentially a monetary tightening, although that is, of course, an independent area of policy. One of the big criticisms of the government right now is that they don't seem to have a monetary policy when it comes to where interest rates should be, where it comes to what the mission for the Bank of England should be. Currently, the target for inflation is 2%. No one on earth believes that we're going to get to 2% inflation next year, or the year after, or probably the year after that. If the government wants to set the Bank of England a realistic target, they might want to think about what realistically inflation may come down to next year and ask them to deliver that. But interestingly, we were hearing a lot about the government's willingness to lower the tax burden, to cut taxes. What we seem to be hearing out of last night and into this morning is we're not going to see that income tax cut plan for 2024 be brought forward. We're not going to hear a huge amount of tax cutting from the Prime Minister today. We might hear ambitions about the future, but nothing in the immediate term, and that's going to be a concern for many people. Indeed, I heard from a source last night that when Rishi Sunak addressed the 1922 committee yesterday, he spoke in the generality about cutting taxes, but the only specificity he mentioned was actually a tax rise, potentially raising taxes on people owning second homes.
And the OECD also saying the UK needs to cut taxes, and pretty much the only ones in Europe at this point who are raising them. Really interesting talking about all of this. Tom, thank you very much. See more of you, I'm sure, throughout the day here on GB News. But for more on the Prime Minister's plans for housing specifically, let's bring in our presenter and reporter, Rosie Wright, who's out and about for us this morning. She's an estate agent in South London. Good morning to you, Rosie. Just explain a little bit about what this right to buy scheme might mean where you are.
Good morning to you, Isabel. Well, yes, Boris Johnson's got three main objectives really today. One is to say, I'm going to make it more affordable for people on lower incomes to buy their own homes. Second of all, I'm going to increase the number of houses that are available. And third, one of his key priorities is let's move the narrative on now from parties into real policy. He's going to lay out that policy in Lancashire at a speech later today, and we've got a bit of an idea ahead of that. We are a bit light on the detail, but what we think he's going to say, the first and key thing is to extend the right to buy to tenants, those people living in housing accommodation, social housing. It's a policy that was first put in place in the 1980s under Margaret Thatcher. And the second of all, there's an idea that he may say that that housing benefit you could be on will let you use that to pay for a mortgage. Well, let's find out a little bit more about how this could work. Someone who was selling houses in 1980, I'm sure he won't appreciate me saying that, was James Baring, a partner now at Felicity J. Lord. Thank you very much for speaking to me. How did it work under Margaret Thatcher?
Morning, Rosie, morning. It worked beautifully in many ways. I was working down in Battersea in the 80s, and we were dealing with a lot of local authority properties on the Ethelberger estate. I have a slightly distorted view of it insofar as I only saw the properties and the vendors of people who were selling. I'm sure that Lady Thatcher's dream was the home ownership, which people loved. And I'm sure that some of them did buy the properties and continue living there and then passed it on to their children, and that was the dream. I dealt with people who were selling, and again, it was very lovely. Those were people who'd been living there for decades and, you know, wanted to move maybe out of central London, down to the seaside, lovely property in Broadstairs, wherever, or move close to children, grandchildren. It was a lovely dream.
So you were speaking to the people who benefited from Margaret Thatcher's policy. The idea from Boris Johnson today is to give the right to housing association tenants to be able to buy that home, probably at a discount. Do you think that's a good idea, and will it work?
Well, certainly at a discount, and it's a significant discount. It will add property into the housing market to buy. I mean, as with most estate agents, we deal with a whole price spectrum, from multi-million-pound properties to local authority properties, and it's a large part of our business. So it does add stock, but according to the statistics that I've seen, only 50% of properties that are bought under the right to buy are actually sold on. 50% are actually let out. So yes, that's increasing letting stock. Is it substantially increasing properties to buy? A little bit.
That's one of the criticisms, is that then people buy these properties and they're not replaced by another form of social housing at the same rate at which they're being sold, which particularly some homelessness charities have said this is going to exacerbate the problem for the people who are the poorest.
Well, I mean, in the run-up to my lovely interview with you, I did do a little bit of research, and some of the statistics that came up was, quite terrifying. Only 5% of properties that were sold were replaced by the local authority for social housing. That's quite a low figure.
And Boris Johnson has promised to change that and said we will replace that social housing that gets sold with more. Are we building homes at a pace that's even near enough to the rate at which we need them?
No, it's a simple answer. I mean, homelessness is a massive problem. But yes, I mean, the original question, is it going to add to the housing stock to buy? Yes, to a degree. I wouldn't say to a huge degree. There are, potentially other ways that could be gone about to increase the housing stock for people to buy. And with the rental, they come back onto the rental market at a higher level than they would have been, rent-wise, than they would have been if you were, paying a council rent. that rent from a private landlord is often subsidised by the taxpayer, etc., etc. So, I mean, it's very contentious. It's complicated.
And we will see more of the detail later. James, thank you very much. The Prime Minister will make that speech in Lancashire and we'll bring you the details of it here. In the meantime, I'm going to be speaking to people who are trying to buy and also those selling these properties to try and work out what policies the government could put in place to make it easier for those of us on lower incomes to actually then own their own home.
OK, Rosie, thank you. Well, here in the studio, let's talk to property expert Russell Quirk. Good to see you this morning. Look, in terms of social mobility, this could be a real step forward, couldn't it?
Well, it's a good thing depending on who you are, isn't it? So if you're a social housing tenant, you're now going to be given the opportunity to buy your home, generally at a huge discount. So the average discount across these right-to-buy properties is anything around 40 to 45%. So it's huge in terms of discount. So yes, that's good. I think, as has just been pointed out though by Rosie, the big problem which the government never solves with all of these announcements is that they're kind of, and you could call this a distraction technique, I think, at the moment, couldn't you, given where Boris Johnson is right now. All of these things seem to be focused on the demand side rather than supply side. So, you know, not only, as has just been mentioned, do we see this kind of this disparity in terms of the social housing properties that get bought and not replaced, but we're also going backwards now in terms of the amount of homes that are being built in the UK. So the government's own target is 300,000 homes to be built every year. We've only ever got close to that once or twice in the last 20 or 30 years. Last year, we went backwards and we only built 180,000 homes. So we're not solving the fundamental problem, not just in terms of provision and supply, but of course, if we did provide more homes, then actually we might end up with a market that's a little bit more balanced and doesn't see these huge increases in value that we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years. You know, where the average home now is at least 20% more expensive than it was before the pandemic.
I mean, it's such a difficult one to solve. I mean, you can see the ambition, but then the problem behind it, as you say, is making sure that you do provide that social housing and you don't have that shortfall, which historically we saw happen the last time this policy was brought in. Yeah. So, you know, how do you solve that? I mean, we're talking about making sure it's easier to develop on brownfield sites and policies like that.
I think that, so Michael Gove apparently is about to also make some announcements around planning, whereby effectively neighbourhoods will have the veto on whether you're allowed to have your extension or your new home built, which is hardly going to speak towards providing more homes. I mean, if anything, it's going to make provision of new properties, you know, go back.
You're calling us a nation of NIMBYs.
We are. We absolutely are a nation of NIMBYs, you know, which is ironic considering, you know, so many of us live in new homes that perhaps 5, 10, 20 years ago were themselves, you know, on green fields. The problem we've ended up with, I think, is that, and I mean this with no disrespect to them, but the big house builders, so the likes of Bovis and Taylor Wimpey and Persimmon and so on, they effectively are now responsible for over 50% of all new homes built in the UK. They also, by way of Section 106 agreements, are responsible for the social housing contingent generally that comes off the back of those planning permissions. So we've really left our entire housing provision as a nation in the hands of the shareholders of 10 companies. So my suggestion actually in terms of the solution is that the government gets hold of this in terms of actually maybe the government even starting to build houses themselves. And I don't just mean council homes like we did many, many years ago, you know, back in Macmillan's day when we built some 300,000 a year. But actually the government using public land, of which there's lots, to build properties of both an affordable and a social nature and full market value, so that they're providing properties based on demand rather than shareholder whims and wishes that obviously ebb and flow year to year.
Yeah, look, in terms of this particular policy, though, is it all a bit smoke and mirror in the sense that the government's own figures saying, you know, the number of people who are likely to buy their own home as a result of this is about 22,000 a year?
Yes, it's definitely posturing, it's definitely opportunism, and it's channeling Thatcher, which some would argue politically that Boris Johnson should absolutely be doing right now, you know, in terms of getting himself out of the hole that he's very much dug for himself. So yes, and you know, the other announcement, as Rose has just mentioned, of course, is that there's a potential for housing benefit claimants to be able to use housing benefit for the purposes of getting a mortgage. Now, I looked at those numbers this morning. The average housing benefit provision, the actual payment that's made to housing benefit claimants, is £95 a week. Now, when you calculate that out, that ends up at a mortgage of £25,000. Well, what good is that when the average house price in the UK is £280,000? So, look, it's pretty much an empty gesture, frankly.
Yeah, but you can see people getting upset about that. Lottie's been in touch this morning and says, my partner and I both work, can't afford to buy a house, but we rent privately. Why should our taxes be used for housing benefit claimants to buy their homes?
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
I agree. And of course, this whole thing has been subsidised by the taxpayer.
Yeah.
So those private renters are paying tax to allow somebody else to get a big discount on a home that they didn't themselves have.
Corin says the same. Why should hard-working people buy houses through their tax for people on benefits? It's a no from me. And Malcolm from Carlisle says, as well as feeding the children of benefit claimants, the taxpayers now going to be expected to buy their homes for them.
Well, politically, homeowners apparently, according to the Conservatives, are more likely to vote Tory. That's what this is all about.
Oh, that's cynical.
But true.
Oh, Russell, we shall leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. OK, it is 20 minutes past 8. Let's bring you up to date with some of the other headlines for you today. And campaigners have formally launched legal bids to stop the government's plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. The first flight expected to leave next Tuesday, but lawyers for more than 90 migrants have already submitted legal challenges asking to stay in the UK.
2 British fighters who were captured by Russian forces in Ukraine can face 20 years in prison after appearing in court in the Russian-backed separatist region of Donetsk. In a video shared by Russian state media, Aiden Aslin and Sean Pinner allegedly admitted to training in order to carry out terrorist activities. Mr. Pinner could also be facing the death penalty after he is accused of admitting to seizing power by force.
Thousands of customers were provided with an unacceptable service following Storm Arwen. That's according to a review by the energy watchdog Ofgem. The storm caused almost 1 million homes in Britain to lose power in November last year. The business secretary who commissioned the review previously said the long delays some people faced to be reconnected were not acceptable. Loads of you getting in touch on our Love Island discussion. And I have to say, so far, they're all with me and Mike.
I've seen some not on your side, I must admit.
Well,
stick up for myself. But you know what? You know, that's what it's all about, providing debate and discussion. If you think that one of the most popular programmes on the TV in this country is immoral, let us know your thoughts.
Yeah, and I was just trying to find that one about smoking that someone sent me, and I can't find it. Just on me. Oh, here we go. Ray says, regardless of the arguments on banning smoking, the government collects about £10.27 billion a year from it. Where will these billions come from when they ban smoking? Fair point. It's a fair point.
Julie says, I started smoking when I was 14 and decided to stop 4 years ago. I've never bought another packet of cigarettes since, and I feel better for it. But it should be the people's choice to smoke, not the government telling us we can't. It is our freedom of choice. Tend to agree with you, Julie.
Yeah, and there's another one on here saying I'm not right on the smoking issue because I'm sort of all for getting rid of it. And sadly, I can't find who it is. But there you go. And you saw it, you sent it, and I've read it, and, you know, you're entitled to view. And actually, I mean, you make a valid point. You do make a valid point. Maybe I'm being a bit unrealistic.
Can I read this one out? It's provocative. John from Scotland says, you can't smoke until you're 21, but in Scotland you can choose your gender at 4. He says Sturgeon would be outraged that you can't smoke from birth. Politically charged response there. Let us know your thoughts this morning. Keep them coming in. We love to see what you think and engage in our discussions throughout the programme.
Yeah, coming up, though, we're going to be talking about monkeypox. How seriously should we take it? It's been upgraded to the same level of threat as leprosy and the plague, which sounds pretty serious, doesn't it? First, though, here's your weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Fine at first today, sunny spells in the south and then later in the day the east as well. But rain is expected to move in from the west. That rain because of a series of weather fronts that are approaching from the west as we speak. Low pressure carrying those fronts. Used to be a tropical storm, ex-tropical storm Alex. No longer a tropical storm, just an area of low pressure in the Atlantic. But it will bring some windy weather during tomorrow and Saturday especially. Before that happens, actually, we keep the sunny skies across much of central and eastern England, parts of southwest Scotland, Cumbria as well through much of the day. Some showers will develop after a cloudy start in the east of Scotland as well as the far northeast of England. The more persistent rain arrives into western areas, and 16, 17 Celsius for Plymouth and Cardiff will feel quite cool compared to recent days. 21 Celsius, meanwhile, in the east of England, and certainly an improvement here compared to recent days. But the cloud and the rain in the west tends to push eastwards, fading away, so not much to it by the end of the night. And then, increasingly, the cloud breaks up. Still the potential for some showers in the far southeast and the far northwest, but in between clear spells and a keen breeze, that wind starting to get stronger all the while. And, of course, with that wind in place, it's not going to be a cool start to Friday. For many places, we'll look at the morning lows at 13 to 15 Celsius. So a blustery day to come tomorrow. Plenty of bright weather. For much of England and Wales, it stays dry. There'll be sunny spells, but it will be noticeably breezy. And that wind particularly strong towards the northwest. And for Western Scotland, the risk of gales around exposed coasts. The showers will be lively as well for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Risk of hail and thunder. Similar conditions on Saturday with frequent showers towards the northwest, along with a strong wind and gales for exposed coasts. Brighter skies for the rest of the UK, but breezy and feeling cool.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 8:27. We are talking about monkeypox now. Doctors in England are now legally required to notify their local council or their health protection team about any suspected monkeypox cases, as they would measles, scarlet fever or tuberculosis.
Yeah, the move is intended to help manage the virus, which has been reported across 26 countries, including the UK, many in Europe. Let's talk to Dr. Shahid Jamil, who joins us now. Good to see you this morning. What do we make of the notification changes here? Is that a sensible way forward?
Yes, I think so. I think it's a sensible public health response to make it a notifiable disease in the UK. And that's simply because there is an unusual spread of monkeypox in the UK as well as several other countries in the world. So, for example, since 2018, there were only 7 cases of monkeypox in the UK, but now there are roughly 300 plus cases. So it's a good public health response to make it notifiable so that we can track and trace and understand this much better.
Look, lots of people very jittery about all of this, just coming out of a pandemic. How would you reassure people that are fearful about monkeypox? Because, you know, there really isn't a comparison with COVID when we're talking about this, because this is a virus that has been around for a long time.
Oh, yes, there isn't any comparison. But yes, it's understandable that people are jittery. I mean, after all, we've been suffering from COVID for over 2.5 years. The virus causes roughly 2,000 cases, symptomatic cases, primarily in West and Central Africa every year. In 2020, for example, there were over 6,000 cases reported in Africa, 95% of them coming from the Democratic Republic of Congo. So this virus is endemic in that part of the world. What we are now seeing is possibly the virus becoming endemic in other parts of the world as well. And what we are seeing now is something that has probably been going on for a couple of years, spreading under the radar. And now we are seeing some cases coming up. As far as the two diseases are concerned, when COVID came up, there was no vaccine, there were no treatments. For monkeypox, there are two vaccines. One of them is also available in the UK. There are two drugs available. One of the medicines has a lot of side effects, but the other one seems to be doing much better. So we are much better prepared with monkeypox than we were with COVID. And finally, COVID spread through respiratory route. Monkeypox doesn't spread that way. It requires close contact to transmit. So there are many, many differences between the two viruses.
Should we be concerned at this stage?
Well, I think we should be careful, we should be cautious, and we should let the public health authorities track it. But as individuals, as the public at large, we should not panic. I think things are under control.
Can I just ask you finally, before we let you go, the link with hamsters and guinea pigs, talk of quarantine and fears of a spillover event. Can you enlighten us a bit about that?
Well, actually, you're right, because the last outbreak in the US was tracked to some pets that were obtained from a shop that also had some pets brought on from Africa. And the transmission that happened between the animals in that environment led to some of the cases coming up in humans. This is quite natural for animal viruses to be spreading. So yes, I think we need to be careful with rodents as pets, because rodents are the primary means of circulation of this virus in the environment.
OK. Look, Dr. Jamil, really good to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
The message seems to be, don't panic at this stage. Just be perhaps a little bit wary. Maybe a good way to approach it all. Look, we're going to take a short break, but we are back in just a moment. Dawn Neeson and Mike Parry will take us through the papers once again.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's 8:34. Let's bring you up to date with the latest headlines this hour. The Prime Minister is set to announce a string of housing reforms, including plans for lower-paid workers to use benefits to buy their homes. Boris Johnson will make a speech in Lancashire later and will commit to extending the right to buy scheme for housing association tenants. He'll argue £30 billion in housing benefit that currently goes towards rent could help people secure and pay for mortgages.
Campaigners have formally launched legal bids to stop the government's plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. The first flight is expected to leave next Tuesday. Lawyers for more than 90 migrants have already submitted legal challenges asking to stay in the UK.
Thousands of customers were provided an unacceptable service following Storm Arwen. That's according to a review by the energy watchdog Ofgem. The storm caused almost 1 million homes in Britain to lose power in November last year. The business secretary who commissioned the review previously said the long delays some people faced to be reconnected were not acceptable.
The firefighters' leader says he's not hopeful that the Grenfell Tower inquiry will lead to significant change. The Fire Brigade's Union General Secretary, Matt Rack, has warned that no one is learning lessons from fires in the UK.
Time to go through the papers this morning. I'm sure it won't be lively at all. Joined again by Dawn Neeson and Mike Parry, regulars on the show. Let's start, Mike, with Only Fools and Horses. Page 3 of The Guardian.
Yes.
Famed for its literary work.
Yeah, this is a great story because it recognises Only Fools and Horses as a true literary product, a literary work, OK? Now, this has been a court case, and what happened is a company set up called Only Fools, brackets, Kushti, Dying Experience. And what they did was they got actors to pretend to be the characters in Only Fools and Horses, and I don't know whether you were a fan of it for years, but I was, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was an interactive experience. You're eating and dining while people dressed like, you know, Del Boy and Boise were walking around you and making jokes. Anyway, the estate of the original writer, John Sullivan, a great man, he's the guy who invented it and wrote all the scripts. They have challenged this and said you're stealing the identity, and it all depended on whether or not the judge would say, is this a literary work? So the judge had to take a box set of Only Fools and Horses home for the weekend. Honestly, he watched at least 3 episodes and he came back into court and said, this is definitely a literary work. You can't go around imitating Only Fools and Horses with your dining experience. And I think that's a great victory for one of the greatest TV productions, really, of the last 50 years. I'm very pleased for it.
Well, yeah, I think you're right in terms of legally how it stands, but I tell you what, it's the greatest form of flattery.
It is.
Isn't it?
It is. And also, I'm sure many of us might have worked with people like John Challis, OK? I worked with them a number of times. I mean, he was such a great guy and so different to the character he portrayed on TV.
Yeah, but I tell you what I loved about him is he's totally different.
Yes.
And if you asked him to do a line or two, he'd do it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You know, Marlene! You know, I always got him to shout that whenever I was working with him. And it just, the sheer genius of all the actors and characters involved. So I'm just thrilled that, as you quite rightly say, the flattery of it all is that it's been recognised as an absolute quality product that has to be protected.
Well, what is the definition of literacy? It's something that's written, that is enjoyed, and so how do you define it? It doesn't have to be snooty, does it?
No.
The problem I have with this, it's a victory for that, but it's also a defeat for fun.
Well,
it was fun doing it. I mean, we did the 40 Towers one, which again could come under the same classification, and it is really
but Dawn, my view is it was genius. You know, Only Fools and Horses was genius. Why should somebody just set up a little dining club and imitate everything from Fools and Horses? It wasn't their creation. They don't deserve to be making commercial money out of imitating Only Fools and Horses. No, it doesn't. If you wrote a great TV series, supposing you wrote Downton Abbey, Dawn, OK, and I'm sure you're very capable of doing it.
It's not my class, love.
And then all of a sudden, somebody set up a little cafe somewhere and called it, you know, Downton Towers or something like that. I mean, they're stealing your copyright. I think it's a great victory, and I'm glad it's happened.
Let us know your views on that. Let's talk about trigger warnings, Dawn. This is in the Star front page.
Not that we have any in the studio with us this morning, do we, Isabel?
Sorry, is that a dig?
It is a dig. You're out of touch with the viewers.
Yes, absolutely.
And listeners.
Any case, it's the front page of the Daily Star, having a bit of fun, as it is wont to do. And it is basically that I love the phrase woke university bosses have warned students studying Egyptian mummies, archaeology, that they will or might encounter human remains and should be prepared for this. I'm not making this up. It's a proper story. Yes, this is archaeology undergraduates at the University of York got a string of content warnings, as they are called these days, to prepare them for displays of ancient bodies as part of the institution's mummification module. This is the point of the course, isn't it? If you are studying archaeology, you are digging old dead things up, looking at old dead things. I'm not looking at you, Mike, in any way, shape or form.
No, please don't.
This is right. So, history expert Professor Alan Sked. It was yet another example of our British universities being, he can't even say it.
Infantilization.
Thank you very much. That word. He said, not so long ago, Glasgow University warned its theology students that a course on Christ ended with a violent episode called the Crucifixion.
How ridiculous.
These are university students. It's clever people.
Do you think that actually what's happening here is they're trying to warn them, beware of the curse of Tutankhamun? Because, of course, the people who opened Tutankhamun's tomb all died, didn't they, within a few years? So maybe it's a sort of nod and a wink to, if you go around digging up mummies in Egypt, you could come to a sticky end.
We do live in a world where a packet of peanuts has "this may contain peanuts" on the outside. So
and Walt Disney films and cartoons come with trigger warnings as well.
Talking of what things contain, Mike, you've chosen the story, page 23 of the Mail. And look, where are we now? Thursday since the Jubilee week. We're still talking about the royal children.
Yes, we are.
Mike Tyndall's, we all saw in that famous picture at the weekend, the royal box, telling
that's right.
naughty little Prince Louis, I'm watching you.
That's right.
What's his assessment on what their behaviour was down to?
This is so interesting, because I think this could cause a bit of talk within the royal family. What Mike Tyndall's saying, and by the way, I think Mike Tyndall is the best royal, him and Zara. Do you see the way they linked arms as they went up the steps at St Paul's? They're a real close couple. They've got 3 kids themselves. He was sitting next to Boris Johnson during this celebration, eating a bar of chocolate. You know, the Prime Minister, do you want a bit of chocolate and all that? So I think he's a very natural guy. But, of course, the guy who stole the show was Louis, you know, who's said to be, you know, effervescent and friendly.
The 4-year-old.
The 4-year-old. But Dawn and I have agreed, in fact, it was Dawn's suggestion, perhaps Louis is just a little brat. Maybe
I agree. I think that's cheeky as anything.
And the point is, Mike Tyndall is saying here, they were on a sugar high. Now, to me, that's criticism of the parenting skills of Louis' mother,
hang on a minute. As a mother of a 4-year-old, I'm telling you, you try and get a 4-year-old to sit still for multiple hours with the world's cameras trained on them.
But Mike Tyndall's actually saying he was allowed to have too many sugary sweets.
Well, they were probably trying to bribe them to sit still. Honestly, I can't think of anything worse.
I would have been in real trouble.
This is what I was going to say to you, Stephen. I think we are come from a similar background on this one. If I'd have told my mum to shut up and thumb my nose at her, I would have sat down for a week, I tell you.
You know what? Same here, but I'm telling you, my children have more spirit than any wild animal you'll ever see. And it's easy to say when you... It's just so easy to say. You don't get given the kids you think you're going to get, and you do your best
gin and vodka out of their diets.
I'm telling you, I have to say full respect to Catherine and William.
No, but they were nipping off into the back room, the kids, and unwrapping another sweet, another boiled sweet and all that. All of a sudden, they're hyper, you know, and Mike Tyndall made a point of it. So I think there could be a discussion inside the royal family. He said it on one of his podcasts. He said it on the podcast, which is called The Good, the Bad and the Rugby.
Mike Parry, how many sweets have you had this morning? Exactly.
How many what, sorry?
Sweets have you had?
No sweets.
No.
Gave up sweets when I got diabetes. Gave up chocolate, gave up sweets, gave up everything. And I will live forever.
He's naturally like this.
He is naturally like
Naturally
this.
like
What do
this.
you mean?
Mhm.
A bit harsh.
What's the Telegraph saying about a religious mob?
Oh, right, OK. This is the story that's been rumbling on all week. It is, again, cancel culture. This is the film that has been recently pulled from Cineworld, yeah. It's a film about the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad, and involved a petition, but more than a petition, to get it pulled off the cinema screens. And there was a group of very aggressive people outside the cinema and making threats to the people putting the film on. So Cineworld have agreed, bowed down to pressure, censorship, mob rule basically, and pulled the film from release. Now, it's a film that have the people campaigning against it have said it was blasphemous. We don't have a law of blasphemy in England. We do in Northern Ireland still, but not in England. And heaven forbid we go that way, no pun intended, by the way. But it's a very, and this is our, an interview with Dame Sarah Khan, the government's independent advisor on social cohesion and resilience, and she had said quite rightly, there's a very slippery slope to go down. If we allow mob rule, whatever your religion, to dictate what other people can and can't read or see at the cinema, it is a dangerous precedent we're setting here. And it's like, it's also in a similar area, because this is in Yorkshire, what happened to the teacher in that school in Batley, Yorkshire.
Still in hiding.
He's still in hiding a year on, Isabel, for simply teaching children a lesson that was not offensive and not blasphemous, because we don't have that in this country. I mean, the kind of countries that do have strict blasphemy rules are also the sort that put homosexuals to death and women have no rights whatsoever. And it's not a road we need to go.
I mean, the Satanic Verses brought all this out into the open, didn't it? Do you remember the book, The Satanic Verses?
Yes, yeah.
It ended up with, I've forgotten the name of the author.
Salman Rushdie.
He ended up in exile for 10 years with a permanent team of protectors because he was actually threatened with being killed. It was a religious decision. He must be killed. A fatwa, absolutely.
And still lives in fear, and his family to this day.
Absolutely, yeah.
Let's talk money. In the Mail, Mike.
Yeah, I love money.
Ewan Blair, who, in my mind, is still about 14.
I went to university with Ewan Blair. Just a little anecdote. We used to see him everywhere, walking around, bless him, quite often on his own, which is not fair to say, but always with a red... with an orange Sainsbury's bag. He looked like he didn't have two pennies to rub together. How times have changed.
How times have changed. He's 38, he's not 14, but I think Ewan Blair was the one who was found slumped drunk, wasn't he? In Sloane Square.
He was.
Yeah, that's right, when he was 14, after having a big session. But anyway, look, I take my hat off to this guy. Tony Blair's eldest son, that's Ewan, is in line for a £100 million windfall after a tech business he founded 6 years ago has been valued at £1.4 billion. It will take his wealth to an accumulated £420 million. My attitude to that is, good luck to you, son. You seem to have done very well. People will say, well, he couldn't have done it without his father. Well, a lot of us couldn't do things without our parents and help from our parents.
But it's interesting that his business is actually going against one of his father's policies.
Absolutely. It's putting money into an apprenticeship firm called Multiverse, you're absolutely right, and it's just grown and grown and grown. But, I mean, do you remember it was Peter Mandelson who said when they got into power, we are very relaxed about anybody becoming filthy rich. Do you remember? That's a quote from Mandelson. Well, he seems to have taken that to heart. His parents are worth about £500 million in the accumulated properties that they've bought and developed since Mr Blair stood down as Prime Minister. So they're a very, very wealthy family, but I don't have any wealth envy. I wish more people did this. I wish more people created wealth, because we have to have the economy expanding all the time in order to provide a society that can look after things like the National Health Service, and this boy's showing the way, and I think he should be praised.
I think it's particularly lovely that it's going against his father's flagship policy, where every youngster is encouraged to go to university.
Education.
Profoundly wrong.
Yes,
because some
I
children,
agree.
myself included, are just not suitable for university. And the apprenticeship scheme, I think, is a brilliant thing and should be brought back for many industries.
Let's look to the future, Dawn, to finish off with in the Star, because for the last couple of decades now, our youngsters have been getting taller.
They have, indeed.
Are we going into reverse now?
We evidently, according to this report in the Daily Star, so that must be true, global warming could turn us into a race of pint-sized humans in a bid to stop us becoming extinct.
Why?
It's a common evolutionary reaction when there is a spike in global temperature, say boffins. I'm not sure what a boffin actually is, but say boffins, and we could end up with a planet full of little people like Danny DeVito, who's...
That's so rude.
Yeah,
But he is quite petite.
Yeah.
It's like, and sort of like many of our cousins and ancestors endured global warming, and many of them did so by shrinking in size. Evidently, the smaller you are, the more likely you are to survive an increase in temperatures. And it is true.
All I can picture is just like Danny DeVito's
Planet of Danny's everywhere.
Yeah.
I find the height thing really fascinating. Just someone who spent a lot of time in Holland. I mean, in the last 150 years, the average height there has increased so much. They weren't always this nation of really tall people until about 150 years ago.
That's right.
That's directly linked to the fact they have this love of milk and calcium
absolutely,
and diet.
and healthy lifestyle. Dawn has deliberately picked this story because she's having a go at me, right? We took a picture. Excuse me. We took a picture and put it out on social media before we came in. Dawn is wearing 5-inch heels, OK? And she's slightly taller than me anyway.
Dawn is a supermodel.
I'm now being mocked as a midget on social media. And when Dawn saw this story, Survival of the Littlest, she thought, that's it, I'm going to stick the boot in on Mike Parry this morning. I know it. I know it.
Mike,
I've known this woman for a long time,
Such a thing, honestly. I mean...
Yes, typical. Look, we've got to leave it there. Mike, Dawn, it has been a joy.
It has.
Thank you very much indeed.
You said that without even...
No, we agreed on something this hour. So that's fine. You're back in the fold, Dawn. You're back in the fold.
Thank you so much. I've been uncancelled.
We'll see. We don't do cancelling. Well, not really. Let's bring you up to date with the headlines at 8:50. And the Prime Minister is set to announce a string of housing reforms, including plans for lower-paid workers to use benefits to buy homes. Boris Johnson will make a speech in Lancashire later and will commit to extending the right to buy scheme for housing association tenants. He's going to argue $30 billion in housing benefit that currently goes towards rent could help people secure and pay for mortgages.
Campaigners have formally launched legal bids to stop the government's plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. The first flight is expected to leave next Tuesday, but lawyers for more than 90 migrants have already submitted legal challenges asking to stay in the UK.
The number of jobs offering a 4-day week has gone up 90%. The job site CV Library says the charity sector, sales, catering and distribution have seen the biggest rise in adverts.
Now, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, has issued a stark forecast, frankly, for the UK economy, predicting the worst growth in the G20, bar Russia, next year, with 0% growth expected.
Let's talk to our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan. Morning to you. Stagflation.
It makes me think of a stag do.
Well, that'd be back to the 70s, wouldn't it?
It would. It's not a laughing matter, but we've got to keep our chins up because there is just a tsunami of bad economic news. And I'm not generally a pessimistic person. I'm an upbeat person, but we have to report it as it is. You say stagflation, Stephen, that is the phrase. It's the combination of high inflation and slow, even stagnating growth. I remember it from when I was a lad in the 70s, and it's not a nice cocktail. So we've seen in the last couple of months, we've been reporting it here on GB News, that the economy, the UK economy, has pretty much hit the buffers. 0% growth in February, just 0.1% growth in March. The OECD is reflecting that. We roared out of the blocks earlier in the year, and there should be some growth later in the year. So we will get 3.6% expansion this year, which is pretty chunky, pretty high up the league table of those advanced OECD economies this year. But next year, we really do hit the buffers, according to the OECD. It's a combination of high tax. It's a combination of the fact that we are dependent on imported energy and imported food, both of which are expensive. The pound's been falling. That makes those imports even more expensive. That puts us almost at the bottom of that league table next year.
There's got to be pressure on then to start cutting taxes.
I don't... I've been writing in the recent days that rather than, Boris Johnson needs to throw some red policy meat to the Tory backbenchers if he's going to survive. Lower taxes, less regulation, scrap that increase in corporation tax next year that's coming in from 19 to 25%. Lots of people running small businesses, watching and listening to this show will know that that's coming down the track. Scrap all that. It's got to be red meat policy, not some kind of vegan sausage. At the same time, we've also got news this morning, and this is pretty gobsmacking. The oil price is creeping back up. It's gone up over $120 this morning, which of course goes into petrol prices. You were reporting earlier about the first £2 a litre of petrol. We've had £2 a litre diesel for a couple of weeks here and there across the UK. But the reason the oil price has gone up is that last week the Saudis, who run the oil exporting cartel OPEC, they said, oh, don't worry, Western world, yeah, we'll kind of sort of back you in the Russia-Ukraine conflict and we'll pump lots more oil so oil prices come down so we don't give Putin lots of leverage. Now you've got another major member of the OPEC exporters cartel, UAE, who's generally seen as sort of pro-Western, you know, one of the friends of America and the UK, and they're saying overnight that the oil price is, quotes, nowhere near its peak. In other words, OPEC won't pump lots and lots more oil to bring prices down. They'll let prices go up so they make more money.
Can I ask you about the OECD? I mean, there'll be people who think, A, forecasts are often wrong, and B, it's not really their place to advise a government on what their economic policy should be, and perhaps suspicious that there's a political point-scoring thing going on here. Perhaps they're even, because they were citing Brexit as one of the causes yesterday. I mean, are they completely apolitical?
That's a really, really good question. Now, the big economic forecasting houses around the world are the International Monetary Fund, broadly pro-American, broadly pro kind of UK-America style economics, less government intervention. OECD, as you well know, is based in Paris. It's much closer to the European Union countries. It isn't always naturally a friend to the UK. On the other hand, the OECD is packed with very credible people doing serious analysis. They're not going to go in off the deep end. Now, I think this 0% next year, they are over-egging it.
Right.
But even the British Chamber of Commerce, Isabel, who is based here in the UK and made up of British companies and people who think about the UK and nothing else most of the time. Even the British Chamber of Commerce is saying this morning they're expecting 0.5, 0.6% growth next year, which is very low. And what's also interesting is both the OECD and the British Chamber of Commerce are now citing in a way that they wouldn't just a few weeks ago, war in Ukraine, big economic impact on the Western world. Until quite recently, it was kind of verboten to talk about that because we just had to hunker down and, you know, back the Ukrainian cause, whatever the cost. But a lot of people are now talking about the economic cost, not just in the Western world, but specifically in Europe to a much greater extent than America.
OK, Liam, thank you. Liam's back with On the Money at 1 o'clock today, of course, and we'll have all the top stories for you in just a couple of minutes.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McKibben from the Met Office. Fine at first today, sunny spells in the south and then later in the day the east as well, but rain is expected to move in from the west. That rain because of a series of weather fronts that are approaching from the west as we speak. Low pressure carrying those fronts used to be a tropical storm, ex-tropical storm Alex, no longer a tropical storm, just an area of low pressure in the Atlantic, but it will bring some windy weather during tomorrow and Saturday especially. Before that happens, actually, we keep the sunny skies across much of central and eastern England, parts of southwest Scotland, Cumbria as well through much of the day. Some showers will develop after a cloudy start in the east of Scotland as well as the far northeast of England. The more persistent rain arrives into western areas, and 16, 17 Celsius for Plymouth and Cardiff will feel quite cool compared to recent days. 21 Celsius, meanwhile, in the east of England, and certainly an improvement here compared to recent days. But the cloud and the rain in the west tends to push eastwards, fading away, so not much to it by the end of the night. And then, increasingly, the cloud breaks up. Still the potential for some showers in the far southeast and the far northwest, but in between clear spells and a keen breeze, that wind starting to get stronger all the while. And, of course, with that wind in place, it's not going to be a cool start to Friday. For many places, we'll look at the morning lows at 13 to 15 Celsius. So a blustery day to come tomorrow. Plenty of bright weather. For much of England and Wales, it stays dry. There'll be sunny spells, but it will be noticeably breezy. And that wind particularly strong towards the northwest. And for Western Scotland, the risk of gales around exposed coasts. The showers will be lively as well for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Risk of hail and thunder. Similar conditions on Saturday with frequent showers towards the northwest, along with a strong wind and gales for exposed coasts. Brighter skies for the rest of the UK, but breezy and feeling cool.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
we're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The Prime Minister promises to unleash the country's fiscal firepower as petrol prices see their biggest daily jump in 17 years.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock on Thursday, the 9th of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel and Stephen. Here's what's leading our news this morning.
Well, the Prime Minister will pledge today to cut costs in every area of household expenditure, from food to energy to transport. In a major speech on tackling the cost of living crisis, the Prime Minister expected to say that Britain will become a strong country with a healthy economy.
The cost of filling up an average family car with petrol could hit £100 for the first time today after the biggest daily jump in pump prices for 17 years. The RAC's fuel spokespersons warned that a peak is still some way off.
And we're going to have all of today's big showbiz news coming up for you with Ellie Phillips as Jennifer Lopez stuns onlookers with her outfit choice at the premiere.
Not for the first time.
No, not for the first time. The premiere of her new Netflix documentary.
And as always, we want to hear from you. We are the People's Channel. Get involved. Email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
And don't forget, if you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe. Doesn't cost you a penny, and it means we'll keep you up to date with all the very latest on the big stories that we're covering day in, day out.
So leading the news this morning, and the Prime Minister will pledge today to help people cut costs in every area of their household expenditure.
In a major speech in Lancashire, he's going to set out his vision for tackling the cost of living crisis, vowing to use fiscal firepower to help those who need it most, adding that we will emerge from this a strong country with a stable economy. Strong and stable. Been a while since we've heard that.
Well, for more on the PM's plans, we can go to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who joins us in the studio again. Look, the context to all of this, the timing of all of this, Tom, off the back of the OECD's forecast that we've just been talking about with Liam Halligan, and, of course, the fact that, you know, things like petrol at record high, taxation at a record high. It's going to be quite a hard sell, isn't this argument from the Prime Minister?
It certainly is. Up until now, the Prime Minister has been saying there's a strong economy, and that's why the UK has been able to deliver for people up and down the country. That's why various spending increases have been able to be funded. However, looking at the data, yes, there are some positive economic indicators. Unemployment is very low, but everything else doesn't look so rosy. Indeed, those growth forecasts are a deep deep concern. And to some extent, today may be the first time that the Prime Minister is publicly acknowledging in such a large way the real headwinds that the UK is facing into. He'll say a little bit later that the headwinds are incredibly strong, but the engine of the UK economy can be stronger. And it's going to be a challenge to get through this period. But really, when it comes to the policy that we'll be hearing about today, we're not going to hear that much detail. We're going to hear the broad brushstrokes of where the government wants to go. But when it comes to actually the specifics of how this is going to be implemented, when it's going to be implemented, what specific help people will get, I don't think we should hold out much hope for that detail today.
But is that just because they haven't worked it out yet?
Well, this does seem to be coming at a time that many people would suggest is forced upon the government due to what happened on Monday. 148 Conservative MPs voting against the Prime Minister in that vote of confidence. It's significant there because I don't think that most of those, or even a significant chunk of those voting against the Prime Minister, were primarily driven by parties or cheese or wine or whatever. I think there's a general sense of malaise with how the government has been performing, with the constant U-turns and changing of policy and lack of clear driving mission in a way that previous Conservative governments have had a mission. David Cameron was singularly focused on the deficit. Margaret Thatcher was singularly focused on market reform. This government talks a little bit about levelling up, but when it comes to specific and coherent ideology, it is lacking. And so to some extent, this is about rebooting the Prime Minister's premiership, trying to set the country on a course that is understandable and one that is more in tune with his own party. However, we're going to need to wait a little while to see that detail. And when it comes to the big demand of his backbenchers, tax cuts, and tax cuts in short order to help people through the cost of living, but also spur economic growth, I don't think we're going to see much in that front.
I think it's the phrase you used yesterday, a blizzard of policy announcements are imminent from Number 10, from the government, and this kind of Operation Red Meat 2.0. But as Liam Halligan then coined the phrase, what we do actually need, or the Conservatives do need to answer their critics, is red meat rather than a vegan sausage. And I suppose in that terms, then we're talking about those tax cuts, which, as you say, no sign of them anytime soon.
No sign of them soon. We're hearing, actually, that this idea that the income tax cut, scheduled for 2024, will not be brought forward. At the lobby briefing yesterday, spokespeople from Number 10 were suggesting that the Prime Minister wants to bring down taxes, but only when he's responsible, i.e.
But the OECD is calling for the government to do that. I mean, when will it be responsible to do it?
Well, exactly. There seems to be an ideological disagreement within the deficit hawks in the Treasury and those who want to see growth almost at the expense of the deficit. There's a sort of ideological crash there. The government's saying that it needs to get the financial footing of the country more stable before it can cut taxes, whereas the OECD pointing to the pretty tried and tested philosophy that actually one way to get the country on a more sound financial footing is to grow the economy by cutting taxes in the first place. It's the Thatcher-Reagan playbook, but it seems to be not one that is being bought into by this government at this stage.
They're not using it sort of for the arsenal ahead of the election, are they?
Well, this is a potential pitfall of this process. We know that an election is expected in 2024, and when is that income tax cut expected? 2024. To some extent, that can look like an election play, but maybe Boris Johnson doesn't have that long to get the economy back on track, to win over his dissenting MPs. We're hearing that a significant chunk of the executive of the 1922 committee are opposed to the Prime Minister. They're the people that can change the rules of no-confidence votes, that could bring another no-confidence vote sooner rather than later. And so the Prime Minister really has a political imperative to think, ironically, about the short term, not the long term when it comes to these things. So it does seem curious that that income tax cut may not be brought forward. But there's something else. Of course, we are this month getting that threshold rise for national insurance. So that's a tax cut for about 80% of the working population because you'll be paying less in national insurance. You'll only start paying it after £12,500 a year. But also income tax, currently, corporation tax, currently scheduled to rise from 19% to 25% next year. Might the Chancellor be rethinking that at a time when businesses are struggling, when costs are going up, indeed when prices are going up? Is the time now to clobber businesses with a massive rise in the tax they have to pay? Might that affect prices? Potentially that's an area that the government may look at.
Especially for SMEs, the smaller businesses. We're always told, being back from 2008 onwards, that, you know, that's where you see the green shoots of recovery for those SMEs.
Oh, certainly. The Chancellor would say that this is only for larger companies. However, who defines a large company? I mean, I believe the number is 250 employees that this would set in at. But that's not the mega global corporations that people think about, although quite often these mega global corporations are struggling as well. And let's not forget, when you levy a tax on a corporation, that's not going to some mythical non-human thing. That's going on people's wages. That's going on costs, that's going on prices, and that's going on investment. That's the only thing that you can tax when it comes to a business, because that money doesn't just sort of sit in a bank doing nothing. That money goes into how that business is run. It materially affects the economy.
OK. Tom, thank you. We'll see you at 9:30.
Now, for more on the housing aspect of the PM's big speech today, let's talk to GB News presenter and reporter Rosie Wright, who's out and about for us this morning, speaking to an estate agent in South London. Good morning again to you, Rosie. This is one of the announcements that the Prime Minister is going to set out, sort of bringing back to the fore a Thatcherite policy that we've seen before.
That is the idea in essence, because for many of us, coming to an estate agent, looking in the window, looking online at hot properties, that's just a dream rather than something that could be a reality. Well, Boris Johnson has got three main ideas when it comes to housing, I guess, and we're going to have that laid out in a speech later. The first is he's saying, I'm going to make it more affordable for those people on lower incomes to be able to buy. I'm also going to increase the number of properties that are available on the market. And number three, I'm going to try and move the focus away from parties onto real policy. Now, there's two main ways he wants to try and do it when it comes to housing. The first is, as you just mentioned, Isabel, is sort of to reignite a Thatcher policy from 1980 when, if you were a council housing tenant, you had the right to buy your property at a significant discount. Well, Boris Johnson wants to expand that to people who live in housing association properties. The second idea, and I have to say details of this are patchy, we'll get much more clarity when the Prime Minister speaks later, is to give people the option to be able to use their housing benefit to pay a mortgage. How will all of this work in practice, and will it help with the current housing crisis? Well, earlier I caught up with estate agent James Baring, who was selling houses in 1980 under Thatcher's policy, to find out what he thought.
It worked then. It was a beautiful windfall, an opportunity for people to own their properties. And a lot of them, I think, maybe probably stayed there, passed on to their children. But then a lot of people also sold up, moved out of London to be near children, grandchildren, be by the seaside, something I would love to do. Will it work now with the extension to the housing association? I think that it will create more stock in the property market to buy. How much of a difference it will make, I'm not entirely sure. It's very hard to know. It's partly because a lot of people do the right to buy and then let out the property.
And one of the real criticisms from the Labour Party, and one of the criticisms of the policy in general, is while that might be brilliant for the individuals or the households who can then buy their home, the rate at which those homes and that social housing is being replaced just isn't keeping pace. So more people have their own homes, but then there's less social housing available for those people really who are the poorest. And when we've got the cost of living continuing to soar, record levels of inflation, how much will this really help those at need? And how will the government provide more houses? The other criticism from the Labour Party is this isn't a new policy, they say. You're rehashing old ideas. First of all, of course, laid out by Margaret Thatcher, but then petitioned by David Cameron, and then again in the Conservative manifesto in 2019. How it will all come into play, we will find out later at that speech in Lancashire.
Good stuff.
Rosie, yeah, thank you very much indeed. Look, don't go anywhere, because we've got all the latest showbiz news heading your way in just a moment, including why today could be the big day for bride-to-be
Really?
Britney Spears.
Details in a moment.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McKibben from the Met Office. Fine at first today, sunny spells in the south and then later in the day the east as well, but rain is expected to move in from the west. That rain because of a series of weather fronts that are approaching from the west as we speak. Low pressure carrying those fronts. Used to be a tropical storm, ex-tropical storm Alex. No longer a tropical storm, just an area of low pressure in the Atlantic. But it will bring some windy weather during tomorrow and Saturday especially. Before that happens, actually, we keep the sunny skies across much of central and eastern England, parts of southwest Scotland, Cumbria as well through much of the day. Some showers will develop after a cloudy start in the east of Scotland as well as the far northeast of England. The more persistent rain arrives into western areas, and 16, 17 Celsius for Plymouth and Cardiff will feel quite cool compared to recent days. 21 Celsius, meanwhile, in the east of England, and certainly an improvement here compared to recent days. But the cloud and the rain in the west tends to push eastwards, fading away, so not much to it by the end of the night. And then, increasingly, the cloud breaks up. Still the potential for some showers in the far southeast and the far northwest, but in between clear spells and a keen breeze, that wind starting to get stronger all the while. And, of course, with that wind in place, it's not going to be a cool start to Friday. For many places, we'll look at the morning lows at 13 to 15 Celsius. So a blustery day to come tomorrow. Plenty of bright weather. For much of England and Wales, it stays dry. There'll be sunny spells, but it will be noticeably breezy. And that wind particularly strong towards the northwest. And for western Scotland, the risk of gales around exposed coasts. The showers will be lively as well for western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Risk of hail and thunder. Similar conditions on Saturday with frequent showers towards the northwest, along with a strong wind and gales for exposed coasts. Brighter skies for the rest of the UK, but breezy and feeling cool.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
we're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Right, it's 9:17. Time to talk about weddings. We've got one person engaged here, Ellie. We've got one newlywed.
Ring off. Actually, that's
it's a heck of a rock.
Wow.
Yeah, he was not messing around. He did not come to play.
No. Stephen, 3 weeks in today, and Britney Spears now getting in on
Yes, I'm so happy about this. I am the biggest Britney fan in the world. Britney Spears today is getting married to, it will be her third marriage, her third husband, Sam Asghari. They met in 2016. They got engaged in September. And yeah, TMZ, who are very rarely wrong with things like this, they say they're getting married today in what they're calling an intimate ceremony with 100 people. I think that's just a normal ceremony in our estimations, but this is showbiz land. And apparently she's not invited any of her family except for her brother. Right. So he's made it, Brian, he's going to be there. But
is that her brother or her fiancé?
That's her fiancé, very, very handsome guy, because he's a model and actor.
OK.
Yeah, and so I doubt we'll see pictures of this in any magazine or anything like this. I feel like this is going to be quite a private thing for them. Good. And then she'll whack it up on Instagram, because that's what she does nowadays.
And where are they going to get married?
We don't know where they're going to get married yet. It's all very top secret at the moment. We just know it's today, this afternoon. 100 people. She's going to be wearing a Versace gown, which Donatella Versace designed herself. We knew that already leading into this. And I think it's really good news because, sadly, she had a miscarriage last month. This was obviously planned for a long time. This wedding, they said when they got engaged, we already know when and where. So I think it's really nice for her to have had this to look forward to and share this fun day.
Oh, yeah.
Good. Well, it's nice. It's nice. I think and I like the way she's going a bit more intimate with it.
Yeah, a little bit more intimate. Not 1,000 people,
no,
you know, just 100.
And now what's going on with J-Lo?
Jennifer Lopez, Can Do No Wrong. It was the premiere of her upcoming documentary last night. It's called Halftime. She premiered it at the Tribeca Film Festival in New York. Halftime was essentially filmed between 2019 and 2020, and it led up to her 50th birthday, and it covered when she performed at the Halftime Super Bowl show with Shakira. So it's kind of this, like, moving on to the next half of her life, if you will, that 50-year stage. It comes out next Tuesday. We'll be able to see it next Tuesday on Netflix. But it premiered last night. She looked incredible at the launch party.
I don't understand how she does it. Ooh. Defies all aging.
This Tom Ford outfit, I mean, I don't know anyone else who could pull this off. If anyone else wore this, I think I'd be like, oh, it didn't work, but it's J-Lo. Like, nothing. Gravity does not do anything to her.
It doesn't look like she's had work done. I mean, I look at her face and I try to see signs of what she's done. Yeah. She just looks identical to how she did 20 years ago.
There's not a lot of material. If you're on the radio, there's not a lot of material in that dress.
No, there's not a lot there. It's very sheer, it's very cut out. She looks phenomenal. But yeah, this is going to be amazing. I'm really excited to see this one because it promises to show her on stage and off stage, her relationship with her two children. We're unlikely to see Ben Affleck in this because of the timeline. They got back together after this had finished filming, but we might see her ex-fiancé, Alex Rodriguez, in this.
I'll tell you why I like J-Lo. Why? It's because, I mean, she's a singer. We get to see behind the scenes, all that sort of thing. But she's a blooming good actress, actually. The movies she does, I think, are really good. Yeah.
She's all right.
She's all right.
She's all right.
She's great for that genre
I'd
of
say
movie.
she's pretty average, but she's a good dancer. Really good dancer.
I'd say of all of them, dancing, singing, acting.
Yes. Oh, no, I disagree with you on that one. There you go, each to their own. Each to their own. Ray Liotta and his final performance.
Yeah, this is really sad. So obviously he passed away last month while he was in the Dominican Republic. He was 67 years old and he was filming a project out there. He won't be in that, but what he is in is his final project, which the trailer was released yesterday. It's called Blackbird, and it's a psychological thriller. He plays the father of a son who's gone to prison and is offered a deal. And the deal is basically, if the son will go into a maximum security prison for those who are criminally insane, and get elicit a confession, then he gets his freedom. Right. So the film looks incredible. Taron Egerton plays the son and Ray Liotta plays the father. So he plays this, highly decorated policeman whose son ends up in prison. So the trailer was released yesterday and it is his final bit of work. So it's an Apple Plus project. It's a series and it's based on a true story. So this is all true. And it comes out on Friday, the 8th of July. And I'm really looking forward to this one because not only is it the last piece of work that Ray Liotta is going to be in, it genuinely looks phenomenal.
Is this Taron Egerton with an American accent?
Yes,
it must be.
He does have an American accent in this. Yes, obviously because he's Welsh and with Elton John. But American accent in this, and honestly, it looks so good. And the executive producers said that even though obviously the guy in the book has a father, they specifically wrote the role for Ray Liotta. They wanted him, and that they've said he is incredible in this. His performance is exceptional. So I think this is one that people are really going to enjoy seeing as well.
Yeah, I tell you what I've enjoyed. I've just got to throw it out there because I finished it last night.
Go on.
Reacher. on
Reacher?
Amazon Prime.
OK.
I've read all the Lee Child books. I've read every Reacher book that there's been. And this, Tom Cruise did the movies.
Right.
Didn't really work. This is a series, 8-parter.
Works.
Unbelievable. Alan Richer in the main role. Absolutely
Did you
fantastic.
binge watch?
Binge watched.
The whole lot?
Yeah.
I love it.
I just finished
Absolutely
Anatomy of a
superb.
Scandal. Have you seen that with Sienna Miller about the Home Secretary?
She's brilliant in that.
She's
Now she can
actually
act.
really
Yeah.
She can act. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I binge watched that. I was actually really disappointed when I got to the end.
Me too.
I was like, is that it?
I was like, and where we go next?
What should we keep our eyes out for in terms of? Have you any TV?
I wanted to say Love Island, but to be honest, yeah, I've been disappointed in Love Island so far this year. Yeah, it had like a lot of promises. Yeah, and like no, it's not.
Not a fan.
Yeah,
I'm not really a fan, but you know, not much of a non-fan as you.
Yeah, no, I would say the two that we've mentioned today. I think the J-Lo one, I think is going to be just really interesting watch, and I think genuinely Ray Liotta's. I think that will be because it's a series.
Yeah.
I think
it's a
series.
Oh, I thought it was a movie.
Yeah, no, it's Apple Plus. That's one that I would say you're going to end up binge watching if you like that true crime.
Yeah.
Line of Duty, if people are into crime stuff. But a few rumours about that.
So obviously season 6 of Line of Duty finished. Everyone was super sad. The cast reunited and put up photographs of themselves all together on social media. And they were actually with Jed Mercurio as well here. So that everyone's like, oh, are they? Are they going to do another one? Potentially a different like spin-off project? We don't know. They've just said, they all put this up and just said, oh, you know, friends, mates reuniting. But I guess it gets tempting when you had such a great time working with people. If something else comes up, maybe it's not Line of Duty, but maybe it's another project them working together, which I think fans will be super excited about.
Or maybe they're just having lunch together.
I know, but I think you can't help but be like, if we all had lunch together in a year's time, we'd be like, should we just do something? Why not? And I think fans would love to see that. I definitely would. I'm obsessed with Line of Duty.
Yeah,
I've got to finish off with something I really like, which is a decent car.
Yeah, see,
I like cars.
See, this
car envy.
Have you? See, I didn't get this one because I just see a car and I'm like, oh, it's blue. It's green. So basically, Tyson Fury took to Instagram and he's shown off this fleet of cars. We know how much he loves showing off his money and flying all over the world. And yeah, he's basically shown off all these cars he's got. And one of them ends up being this. Yeah, lorry at the end. So he's got all these fancy cars, but I think he's showing that he's a bit down to earth because he finished off his display with this truck lorry.
I quite like that. It's a sort of vintage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm more into that than the fast cars.
Of all the pictures we've taken, it's a Bedford truck.
But I love that because I think that's the thing about Tyson Fury is he has all these, like he flies on holiday first class, but then he'll, you know, come back coach with his whole family and stuff. And he does mix it up. And I think that's nice to show that, you know, even if you've got all the money in the world, you're still down to earth and you still want your truck.
He's no Litvinenko, is he? You know. Do I mean Litvinenko?
No, you don't mean Litvinenko. No, you don't.
Who do I mean? Who's the boxer in Ukraine who we've interviewed in this programme? Its name is... Oh, I've had one of those. Been up all night with an ill child. Who do I mean?
I know exactly who you mean. And he's got a daughter with...
Klitschko.
There you go. Yeah. Yes! Yes, Queen! We got there.
Yeah. OK. Look, Ellie, thank you very much indeed.
Super welcome.
Will we see you tomorrow or not?
Who knows? Who knows?
Possibly.
Maybe you will, maybe you won't.
That's it from me for this week anyway. You're back tomorrow, aren't you?
Oh, back tomorrow, Anne. So we'll see you then from 6 till 9:30. Tom Harwood's here next with a briefing.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McKibben from the Met Office. Fine at first today, sunny spells in the south and then later in the day the east as well. But rain is expected to move in from the west. That rain because of a series of weather fronts that are approaching from the west as we speak. Low pressure carrying those fronts. Used to be a tropical storm, ex-tropical storm Alex. No longer a tropical storm, just an area of low pressure in the Atlantic. But it will bring some windy weather during tomorrow and Saturday especially. Before that happens, actually, we keep the sunny skies across much of central and eastern England, parts of southwest Scotland, Cumbria as well through much of the day. Some showers will develop after a cloudy start in the east of Scotland as well as the far northeast of England. The more persistent rain arrives into